5:30 on April 12th, 2022. We're here for our regularly scheduled meeting of the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board for the County of San Diego. I would ask Pastor Spriggs to please call roll.
Susan Youngflesh.
Present.
Eileen Delaney.
Here.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr. I am present. Buki Domingos.
Oops, present.
Thank you. Nadia Keen Ayub.
Present.
Thank you. Bonnie Kink. Bonnie Kink. Okay. Marianne Pintar.
Present.
Thank you. Tim Ware.
Here.
And G.I. Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes roll call.
Thank you. And Mr. Parker, do we have any public comment?
I do it all the time. We have several public comments. At this point, I see one that's already in attendance here, so I will call on her first. It will be Karen Remus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, and good evening, CLERB members. My name is Karen Remus, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a second-generation San Diego County resident. Yesterday, the San Diego Union Tribune published a story about the analytical report commissioned by CLERB last year. The story reported that San Diego has the highest number of excess deaths among California's 12 largest county jail systems. This story was published exactly 1 week after the UT reported on the in-custody death of Mr. Gilbert Gill in a San Diego County jail cell. Mr. Gill was a 67-year-old man suffering from diabetes and dementia. When his family called for paramedics after he showed signs of needing immediate medical help, the San Diego County Sheriff's Department arrived and arrested him.
Anybody else having an issue hearing Ms. Remus? Okay. Ms. Remus, for some reason, we cannot hear you. So just so you know,
Change to the San Diego County Sheriff's Department.
Ms. Remus, we heard probably the first 30 seconds and the last 2 seconds. So if you want to try that again, we will give you the time that you need.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parker. Can you hear me clearly now?
We can hear you clearly now, yes.
Okay, I'll go try it one more time, and thank you again for the additional opportunity. So again, CLERB members, my name is Karen Remus. I'm again a second-generation San Diego County resident. And again, my comment is about the San Diego UT publication of a story about the analytical report commissioned by CLERB last year. The story reported that San Diego has got the highest number of excess deaths amongst California's 12 largest county jail systems. The story was published exactly 1 week after the UT reported on the in-custody death of Mr. Gilbert Gill in a San Diego County jail cell. Mr. Gill was a 67-year-old man suffering from diabetes and dementia. When his family called for paramedics after he showed signs of needing immediate medical help, the San Diego County Sheriff's Department arrived and arrested him. He later died in custody. Mr. Gill was one of at least 6 San Diego County jail inmates to die since the beginning of this year, and one of more than 200 deaths since 2006. Again, my last call to action as CLERB members is just that we desperately need your help. Please keep pushing to bring this desperately needed systemic change to San Diego County Sheriff's Department. Thank you again, Mr. Parker, for that additional opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we'll go to Lynn Owens.
Hi.
Lynn Owens. We can hear you. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you. This is Lynn Owens. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My zip code is 92131. First, thank you and congratulations for the in-custody death study from Analytica. This study provides concrete basis for working with SDSD leadership to create a safer, more effective environment for both professionals and inmates in county detention. Ideally, it can help reduce the millions of dollars being paid to families following in-custody deaths. I hope CLERB and Interim Sheriff Ray will work vigorously together to make improvements based on the problem areas identified in this study. I hope for the same cooperation and progress outside of jails and prisons. Time is valuable, so I won't comment in detail on Yan Lee's death, except to say this. As a woman, if I'm home alone, I'm always a little nervous about answering the door. Even without mental illness or impending eviction, this is always a delicate situation. Surely SDSD is aware of this. Time and distance very likely could have avoided this woman's death. I end with a quote from the San Diego Union Tribune from their article about this, from a retired professional who analyzed a video of the Yan Lee incident. You probably already know this quote well. Quote, even if it's lawful, it's awful. This is going to end up being a training film, unquote. Thanks for your help in making all this better.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Dr. R. Lee Brown. Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown.
Before the previous call, did they say that the San Diego sheriff, no, before I say anything, every life is extremely precious. Everybody deserves to live, and only our Creator can determine when it's not your time or when it is your time. So I want to make that statement right now. And I know that people are upset with the things that they hear in the media. I just want to share with them, I know I've done peer reviews and done studies, and we should take into account people coming into jails after they've been in automobile accidents.
Dr. Brown.
You have to call medical aid. You have to get someone there immediately for them. But I'm not saying that they do things perfectly, but I'm saying because of some of the media stuff that we hear, we have a rush to judge. And I've even seen myself at times in that situation. But let's give them, because I don't know anyone else who I can call that will put their
Dr. Brown.
I'm from the South. I know they're bad police officers, but these people, all of these people are not bad. So please take that in consideration.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Next, we'll go to Ilka Weston. Ilka Weston.
Hi, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I am very appreciative of CLERB coming together and actually looking deeper into the jail deaths. I can tell you a situation that was very unfortunate that actually occurred to me. I was brought into Las Colinas. There was nothing I could be charged with. I had already been on blood pressure medication. And, you know, I saw it as an opportunity to see what's going on inside of there, even though what the actual reason for me being brought in had no merit, and there was nothing they could charge me with. But it was one of those situations where it was a police officer that was taking things into his own hand after I stood up for a Hispanic gentleman that was probably about 19 that had 9 cop cars around him. That's neither here nor there. But there I go into Las Colinas. They had nothing to charge me with. They ended up bringing me back saying they were going to hold me for 4 days, and then they let me go. But while I was there, they did not give me my medication. I could have died. I'm on blood pressure medication, which is very important. My heart has stopped because of the issues with my blood pressure and a rare condition. So I've personally seen that the care that is being given to people, and, you know, also what I had to go through while I was there is people thought I was a narc, that I was some kind of undercover narc. But I saw this as an opportunity to see how people were treated. And I was so disgusted with the behavior of deputies towards inmates, because going to jail is not a reason to treat people worse than we treat um, cockroaches. That's what I saw. I saw deputies with badges and guns treating people poorly that were sick. And this was a long time ago. This had to be about 7 years ago. But I do remember that I could have died. When they finally took my blood pressure and they found out how high it was, they finally got medication to me and had to go to the point of actually giving me clonazepam. This can happen to anybody. And when it almost happens to a person like me who's law abiding, politically involved, associated with many people that are in office, and in fact, I'm out right now walking and talking and actually participating in an event stopping the criminalization of our house list, it can happen to anybody. When people get into the jail facilities, there has to be more care. There has to be more questions. They can't assume that somebody's lying about the medications they need at that point. Now, granted, that has led me to question even being on medication, but I also know that was a fluke that brought me into that kind of environment. I think it's important to have leadership like David Myers, because he actually knows that being born, being, a human, being misunderstood is not a reason to be tried and beaten down by law enforcement that are in the private position of the federal, government. And it's just disappointing that we allowed a man that used to be our sheriff to retire the day before these audits came out about the high death. So if
Thank you, Ms.
did I,
Weston. Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Weston. Next, we will go to Dr. Fishman. Dr. Fishman, are you there?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Uh, Sorry to come to you guys as our unfortunate, all too common routine with another in custody death yesterday. And for the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego and North County Equity Justice Coalition that I work with, this was our major concern. As happy as we were and how much we appreciate the state auditor's report, we were worried that the in custody deaths would continue and that it wouldn't make a difference. We appreciate the statewide legislation, SLIC, Saving Lives in Custody, that Dr. Weber's proposed, and we hope that that will pass through. And we also appreciate that the Board of Supervisors has adopted the state auditor's report and the recommendations. But clearly, even with those steps being taken, Sheriff's Department doesn't care. It's not translating to actually a substantial change on the ground for how people are treated in custody. And the worry is that, of course, now it's even getting worse. It's not even a matter of just keeping the same numbers that could actually accelerate. We're hoping that more will be done. We're hoping that not just elected officials, but boards and commissions that directly or indirectly have an impact on this will take bolder stands, more courageous stands. I hope you guys do continue to shed light on it, whether it's through having another town hall or even having something like a press conference. I think it's really important that you get out there publicly and talk about what you're doing to change and to make a substantial difference in the amount of people that are dying on a regular basis in custody. It's really sad. It's very it's really gut-wrenching to see this happen and to know that the politicians now can literally wash their hands saying, well, we've done this, there's nothing more that we can do, and that it's out of our control. It's just simply with the Sheriff's Department. So I'm hoping you appreciate how deeply concerning and upsetting this is for the community, and to keep coming back to talking about these young folks, young adults that are dying in custody, and people that quite often have not even gone to trial, to court yet. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I hope that you continue to do work and that you think about more effective and more public ways that you can have an impact on the in-custody death rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fishman. Next, we will go to Shane Harris. Reverend Harris, are you there? Reverend Harris. Reverend, we can see your picture. We can't hear you though.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely, we can hear you now. Your 3 minutes starts now, Reverend.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Parker. And I want to thank CLERB for your leadership and what you're trying to do. I first of all want to apologize to my community and to all of the people who have been impacted by a jail system that leaders and people over the last decade were not involved in this issue. We have a very serious crisis happening in our jails, and it is the responsibility of all of us to take this on and to ensure that it gets not only enough visibility but enough action. So I just want to say that today we had a very productive meeting. My office had a meeting already previously set up with interim sheriff Anthony Ray, and a number of people joined me in the meeting, including Francine Maxwell, Yusef Miller, Lori Saldana, former Assemblywoman, Marilyn English, and a number of discussions were had. But the main topic of discussion is my urging of the sheriff, who is now the sheriff, Anthony Ray, and the department to endorse State Bill AB 2343, the Saving Lives in Custody Act. The support from the department is critical, and the sheriff did confirm we were the first to ask him this today. This is the first time he's been asked to endorse the measure officially as the sheriff, and the department has been asked. And it is imperative that the department endorses this measure. But not only is it imperative that the department endorses this measure, it's imperative for every body that is claiming to want to provide oversight and reflect change within this very dangerous issue, that they also do the same. So I'm now urging the County Law Enforcement Review Board, in contingent with my request to the county sheriff, to endorse AB 2343. I'm asking on record for this board to submit a resolution, bringing forth a resolution to support AB 2343, the Saving Lives in Custody Act. And obviously that would then mean that you are then issuing a letter to the state legislators. I also am asking this review board, in passing that resolution to support AB 2343, that resolution will include a request to the San Diego County Board of Supervisors that they also pass a resolution on behalf of the county supporting AB 2343. The fact is this: we just had our 7th death yesterday, this year. And the fact is that there needs to be urgent demonstrated action. And one thing I know about resolutions is they carry weight in the context of claimed and announced support for
Reverend,
measure.
Reverend Harris, thank you for your time, sir. Thank you. Time. Next, we will go to Yusef Miller. Mr. Miller.
Yes, this is Yusef Miller with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition and the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego, from the Saving Lives in Custody campaign that morphed into the Saving Lives in Custody Act. And we're really appreciative of Dr. Weber for taking up this fight for saving lives in custody. And I just want to impress upon the CLERB, which I think they're already on the same page as us, but making sure that they keep the muscle behind this steamroller, that this is a crisis. This is a crisis of safety, a crisis of disparity. This is a crisis of race and ethnicity. And we really need to get behind this and look for an immediate solution. As you've heard already several times, someone died just the other day, and we anticipate more of this coming up, not less. So we want to get in front of it because the families that we're supporting are piling up. And every time we get a new one, the families who are already suffering are re-traumatized. And this is going on and on throughout San Diego County. And we need to get a serious grip around this issue. I thank you, CLERB, for doing everything that you're doing. I thank you for looking at and re-looking at the audit and analyzing it and pulling it apart so that we can do something productive about it. But I just wanted to make sure that I impress upon us the urgency of this crisis that we're living in San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next, we'll go to Miss Francine Maxwell. Miss Maxwell, are you there?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can. And before you start, I also have a written comment from you, and I can read that in, or are you going to cover that, ma'am?
Oh, I'm going to cover it. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Your time starts now, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening. Francine Maxwell, Southeastern San Diego resident. I just wanted to ask the CLERB if you had a list of demands, short-term and long-term, that can be shared with the community as it pertains to our current sheriff being there for 8.5 months. Completely understand that there's long-range goals and things like that. But if there's something that you have a short strategic plan on, something that some type of demand letter that can be shared, I think that that would serve the community and CLERB very well, so that the community can get more educated and understand what can be done now versus long-term once the election is over. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their time, because I know that you're spending extra time, especially on all these reports. The data is a beast, and want to make sure that everybody tells their constituent bases to look at the sheriff's website, because the RIPA data, everything is there, and then they can write down their questions and submit them not only to the sheriff's office, I'm sure, but to you as well, so that you have a lot of people that are subject matter experts on what the data is showing, so that we can have more questions answered in dialogue. So just wanted to come before you tonight, thanking you for the time that you take away out of your busy schedules to volunteer, to be on CLERB, and to make sure that if there's something that can be shared with the community, so that we're pushing together for these 8.5 months while we have an interim sheriff, I think it would serve the community well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Debbie Cortell. Are you there?
I am here. Can you all hear me?
We can. Your time
All right.
starts
And
now.
I just wanted to piggyback on exactly what Francine was just saying, the use of data, as we are hearing the increased counts come up, how data can be used. And I know that the Sheriff's Department has data, but it seems there are a lot of other sources. And I just want to implore you all to not work in silos and to connect the dots with those data, because I think it can be very useful in helping to do some of that hard work. So I just wanted to come and just share that and say, how can we help if that data is made available, if it's transparent, if we can be more proactive by using that data before, again, it gets to the point of deaths or accidents, but increasing the metrics, the transparency of the metrics, fill in the gaps of how better metrics possibly can help in solving some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Joanna Smith-Stravinsky. Ms. Smith-Stravinsky, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
We can, and I did receive your request to speak, so now is your time. Your 3 minutes
All right.
start now.
Thank you so much. I'm actually speaking on behalf of case number 21-054. The person who, in my opinion, was assaulted that day, her initials are AB. Again, my name is Joanna Smith-Stravinsky, and I just need to iterate that I'm here as a private citizen. I'm not representing the government organization in which I work. I want to start off by also recognizing that although I don't agree with the outcome of the investigation that CLERB did in this case, I do really appreciate all the hard work that CLERB does every day and that they undertake on behalf of citizens in reviewing their cases. But I felt it was important for me to speak on behalf of this person because she cannot speak for herself. I continue to be very disturbed and dismayed by what I saw in the field on May 10th, 2021. Prior to this event, I viewed the police as allies in the field. I previously worked for Child Protective Services and would often, police would accompany us out into the field and we'd help protect children. This totally changed my view on things. And to me, this was a clear mental health case. There was no reason this person needed to be incarcerated and assaulted again, is what I viewed as happened. And especially when I called for PERT and psychiatric help. And so again, I feel like there was no need for her to be assaulted and re-traumatized. She spent over 5 months in a combination of jail and a state psychiatric facility, and this completely derailed her life. She lost her housing. And I can't help but think that had she been in a mental health facility from day one and not jail, her life would be completely different today. I hope that if another incident like this happens, that the deputy at the focus of my concern will be looked at and reviewed with a fine-tooth comb, and that disciplinary action will be taken against him. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Dave Myers. Dave Myers, are you there?
I am here.
Yes, I believe we can hear you. Go ahead and give it a shot. All right, let's try this again. Dave Myers, are you there?
I am here. Are you there?
All right, yes, we are. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Dave Myers. And in full disclosure, I am a candidate for sheriff. First off, I want to start by thanking this board for your advocacy, recently, your advocacy, and the leadership under Paul Parker to actually change and meet current community expectations on roles and responsibilities within CLERB. It's not going to be easy. As part of your advocacy and your recommendations, specifically around jail deaths and the recent shooting of Dr. Yan Lee, is this board can make recommendations to either the U.S. Attorney General or the California Attorney General to request what has been very well documented as clear and concise civil rights violations. This board has the authority to make those recommendations and ask those agencies which have that oversight to conduct those civil rights investigations. There currently is a complete failure of leadership within the San Diego Sheriff's Department, which is leading to the racial profiling studies which document what is happening, to the report that your agency just published on jail deaths, to the JLAC report, which demonstrates a historic pattern and practice of abuse. And I would ask that your agency, your board, take a serious consideration and look at making those recommendations to the Attorney General's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Mary Best. Mary Best, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Your time starts now.
Thank you so much. My name is Mary Best. I'm a therapist and a member of the Racial Justice Coalition. This is an item I think that's just coming up right at the top, but I wanted to applaud the board and the members of your recently formed Implicit Bias Ad Hoc Committee for the recommendations to address racial disparities in profiling in the Sheriff's Department, specifically around reducing stops and contacts for lower level traffic offenses and quality of life issues like jaywalking and loitering. Most important, it's critical that the Sheriff Department takes seriously and implements the recommendations to institute pre-employment screening for implicit and explicit bias. I saw that that's one of the recommendations, and I think that's a really critical one, because we know that there are those on the police force, and I agree with the gentleman who said there are good police, there are good officers out there in the field that are doing the best they can, but there are others that have discriminatory beliefs and biases and views, and they don't belong in a profession whose mission it is to promote public safety. Individuals in our communities of color especially, not only do they not feel safe, but in fact, they feel threatened and in bodily danger when they're stopped for routine traffic offenses. And they encounter that police bias that treats them as criminals rather than with the respect they deserve. And also the second thing, very quickly, if I have time, so thank you again for that. But the thing that I'd like to ask is if the board within its oversight capacity has the ability to request from the Sheriff's Department an update on the screening, the health screening prior at intake and certainly prior to booking and detention, so that those individuals who are inappropriately going to be detained, that they can be identified and they can be transported to an appropriate community resource. and a service in the community. So that's something that I would like to ask whether you would be able to request from the Sheriff's Department kind of an ongoing update on what the status is. Because I noticed in the letter that was written by the Sheriff's Department, the March 16th letter, they talked about the working on a more rigorous health screening process upon intake. And so for those that are drug involved or those that have health issues, mental health issues, that's where we're seeing a lot of these deaths that are absolutely so unnecessary. Thank you again for all your work, especially with your ad hoc committee to end these discriminatory practices that impact our citizens so negatively. Thank you so much.
All right, maybe I'll unmute myself. Thank you, ma'am. Next, we will go to Tom Packard. Mr. Packard, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can. Your time starts now.
My name's Tom Packard. I'm a member of the Showing Up for Racial Justice North County group. I've been observing and occasionally speaking at CLERB meetings since January 2021. And while I've appreciated the notable progress you've all made, especially in recent months, to be more assertive and proactive in pressing for greater accountability and transparency on the part of the sheriff, my frustration at the very slow progress regarding systems change has increased. Already this year, there have been 7 jail deaths. Recently, with such a lack of progress, I'm beginning to feel a real sense of outrage, and I wonder if any of you are as well. I've appreciated your thoughtfulness and professionalism as you have done your work, and you don't have to yell during a meeting, but isn't it time that you all show a little more outrage to heighten the sense of urgency that might put more pressure on the sheriff to act? Before I retired at SDSU, I taught and did research on organizational change. Research shows that one of the most important things that an executive can do as a change leader is to show a strong sense of urgency regarding the need for change. Bill Gore and Kelly Martinez have never, to my knowledge, demonstrated a sense of urgency about jail deaths. With Anthony Ray as the interim sheriff and Teresa Adams Haidar as the newly promoted assistant sheriff in charge of jails, you have an opportunity to see if these leaders will be more proactive than Bill Gore and Kelly Martinez ever were. Perhaps with your pushing and encouragement, these 2 new leaders can demonstrate enough urgency to begin the long process of systemic culture change that's needed in the jails. By the way, I hope you will invite each of them to attend at least one of your meetings. Thank you for your attention and your ongoing work to increase transparency and accountability in the Sheriff's Department.
Thank you, Mr. Packard. Next, we will go to Robin Sales. Ms. Sales, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for taking my comment. I am a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice North County, the Racial Justice Coalition, the Equity Justice Coalition. I'm also a member of the Behavioral Health Advisory Board from District 3, though I'm speaking as a private citizen tonight. There are so many issues worth commenting on. Another death on Monday, the need for families to have access to documents that help them understand what happened to their loved ones. The establishment of a family liaison to support them through the incarceration and CLERB process. The acknowledgement and accountability on the part of the Sheriff's Department of their failure to save lives while in their custody or while encountering people in the streets when they are arresting them. And the most important thing here is the need for training for deputies so they know how to behave in a way that promotes life, not hurts people. I appreciate the CLERB's evolving proactive stance in addressing these issues. The latest report by Analytica confirms what we already know. The problems have been identified and the CLERB must continue to press the Sheriff's Department to change its policies. Mr. Parker, I'm calling on you to impress on Sheriff Ray, his staff, and the Board of Supervisors that San Diego County cannot ignore the problems that have been highlighted. In the spirit of transparency, I call on you to develop a publicly available tool that incorporates all use of force and in custody death cases, their outcomes, the policy recommendations, and the status of those so the public can exert its influence to make those recommendations timely and enforced. The Board of Supervisors must consider that the Sheriff's Department cannot police itself. Interim Sheriff Ray has an opportunity to make changes based on the reports that have been received. The problem has been named, and now substantive changes must be made. We can and must have a more humane approach in our criminal justice system. Thank you for the work that you've been doing.
And thank you. At this point, I have one comment to read into the record. I do not see any additional requests to speak. So if that's the case, please allow me to read in the comment from Natalie Mashat. And the comment is, hello, CLERB. May I request that the following comment be read at tonight's meeting? My name is Natalie Mashat. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am from zip code 92131. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Thank you, CLERB, for your work in putting forth several lines of policy recommendations in this month's agenda, as well as the implementation actions detailed. The immense gaps in justice were highlighted again this month with the death of Gilbert Gill just days ago. Inhumane procedures began with the initial arrest, extended to the response of police instead of EMTs to the family's call for medical help, and through the blatant lack of medical care and examination of Mr. Gill while in custody. I appreciate CLERB's data-driven approach and recommendations published in this month's agenda to address racial disparities and deaths under the San Diego Sheriff's Department. I urge CLERB to continue fighting for urgent change, including expanding its abilities beyond recommendations to the Sheriff's Department and to compulsory policy influence. Thank you, Natalie Mashat. With that, Chair Youngflesh, I do not see any additional requests to speak, and I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Moving on then to agenda item number 3, which is minutes approval. Does anyone have any revisions to any of the attached minutes? And as a reminder, there are 3 to approve from March 8th, from March 10th, and from March 22nd. Okay, hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve all of the minutes as written? So moved by G.I. Wilson. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Kinayu. Pastor Spriggs, would you mind calling roll again? And
Okay. Susan Youngflesh.
abstain.
Okay. Eileen Delaney.
Yes.
Okay. Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr. Yes. Buki Domingos.
Yes.
Nadia Keene Ayub.
Yes.
Bonnie Keene. Marianne Pintar.
Yes.
Tim Wilson. I'm sorry, Tim Ware, forgive me. Tim Ware, you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And G.I. Wilson, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Then moving on to agenda item number 4, which is presentation training. And Mr. Parker, I do believe you had a suggestion as to how to proceed with the order of the presentation training.
Sure. Normally we have the public comment, and again, if Ms. Brazo says this is okay, of course. Normally we have the public comment before, so we can do that, I would believe. But I want to make sure, because this is such an important, I mean, all of the topics tonight obviously are important, but there was just maybe some thoughts that perhaps the public can hear first what's going to be said and then make their comments, but I don't know if that's procedurally correct. Ms. Brazo?
Hi, did we have anyone who had already requested to speak on the matter?
Not at this time. I don't have any requests electronically or hands raised on the side here. So not at this moment. We don't have anybody.
Okay, if we don't have anyone at this moment to speak, we could proceed with that. If public comment does come up, we could hear them, but with the understanding that there may not be an opportunity to engage back and forth. Rather, it would be public comment.
Very well. Thank you, ma'am. Chair Youngflesh, that answers my question. So what I'd like, Ms. Chair Youngflesh, may I kind of turn this over?
Yes, please.
So what I'd like to do first, this has been an item in addition to the other items of tonight's agenda. It's been very concerning to our CLERB. Sergeant Daniel Dennis. We have some folks with Department of General Service. I'll introduce them in a minute. Sergeant Dennis with the Sheriff's Department is going to start. And just give an over, just kind of give a brief overview of what the Sheriff's Department's role is, again, with the camera systems and the cameras and the responsibilities thereof, whatever information he can provide. And then our Department of General Service personnel will give from their perspective so that everybody gets both sides of the story. So with that, Sergeant Dennis, are you ready?
I am, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. The floor is yours, sir.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Sergeant Dennis with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, Division of Inspectional Services, and I'll be providing some information on the sworn staff involvement in our maintenance process, specifically related to the maintenance of our camera systems. As you are aware, each of our facilities is equipped with numerous cameras and monitors, and sworn staff assigned to areas equipped with video cameras and camera systems are required to check this equipment at the start of each shift for proper focus and operation. A log entry is made in our jail information management system that documents this. And should an adjustment or repair be needed to the security video system, the sworn staff member would then notify an administrative staff member in the facility who has been designated as the person who would be the liaison between our deputies and our maintenance staff. And this is unique for each facility. Each facility has a different way in which our maintenance staff is informed of repair requests. Ultimately, the process involves a notification being made to a designated person. Each facility has an operations deputy, and this deputy is, in many cases, that designated person. So they're a deputy who acts as a liaison between maintenance and the rest of the staff of the facility. And the designated person then enters the maintenance request into the TRIREGA system. And TRIREGA is a system that our maintenance staff uses to track repair requests. So it's not a system on the sworn side that we generally use. Only one person in our facility has access to that, and they are definitely the person that is the liaison between us and medical. So that operations deputy will then work in conjunction with general services as various repairs are completed. Ultimately, our general service department dictates when repairs are made and how they're made, and the priority in which they're given. So from here, I will defer to the general services staff to speak on how the maintenance requests are processed thereafter.
Thank you, Sergeant. And if I may, Chair Youngflesh, I'll introduce the Department of General Services staff present tonight is the Assistant Director, Nicole Alejandre, Deputy Director of General Services, Michael Curtis, and Facilities Support Manager, Ken Frederickson. Ken is going to be the primary, he's the subject matter expert here. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ken.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. What we do is when we receive a request from the Sheriff's Department, whether it be through the TRIREGA process, or sometimes it'll be a direct phone call, depending on the severity of the issue that might be involved. A technician is then dispatched to the site. If it's an emergency or an urgent work task, typically those are responded to same day, and repairs are then affected if at all possible. The only time those wouldn't be the same day would be if materials or parts are unavailable, and that can happen depending on what the issue is and what has failed. We also provide preventive maintenance work tasks on the camera systems. Those are done on a quarterly basis, and those are generated automatically through the TRIREGA system. So the systems are then, the technician would go to each site, inspect cameras, recording equipment, monitors, check for focus, do any adjustments, cleaning, anything that might be required on those systems.
All right, Chair Youngflesh, so now you have both sides. It's back to you.
Okay, Thank you for the presentation. Based on that, do we have any other public comment?
I see one hand at this point, and that will be Dave Myers. Mr. Myers,
Can you hear me now? Okay.
we can.
Okay, I think it's important for the board members to also understand in the priority categorization of camera repairs, especially within detention facilities, is how is it ranked? Is it a top priority? Is it like a number one being the most serious and it has to be done quickly and overnight, compared to, let's say, something that's not a priority? Let's say it's at the bottom of the list and we get to it when we can. So the board needs to understand that. And then also the normal maintenance that is done, those records, are they public records and are they accessible to your board to understand on a consistent basis what is done to the cameras? And is that consistent with, let's say you get a case where a camera is broken and you can't see during a death investigation something that occurred, but the camera was down. So it'd be important for your board to understand the maintenance record of that camera, when it was last checked, and if it was in normal working condition, but then the next day it was broken. I think that would help you understand the seriousness of the lack of camera coverage in those facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, Chair Youngquist, I don't see any additional public requests to comment. I'll turn it back over to you since you have some board member comments.
Right, thank you. And with that, yes, I was going to ask next if there's board member comments. I'm not sure whose hand went up first, so I do see two, and it looks like she's pointing to Ms. Pintar. Ms. Pintar, please go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank you both, Sergeant Dennis and members of General Services, for your report, Mr. Frederickson. A couple of questions. My first question is for Sergeant Dennis. You mentioned that, I believe what you said is that there are sheriff deputies, when they check, when they start their shifts at the beginning of every shift, they're required to check the cameras to see what's operational. Required to check which cameras? Cameras in a portion of the facility that they are patrolling, or I'm trying to understand, like, how many cameras are they supposed to check when they begin their shift?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
So they would be responsible for checking the cameras for the area in which they are assigned. So they have digital video recording systems in different housing units, and the deputies assigned to those housing units would be responsible for checking that camera system at the beginning of their shift.
Okay.
In some facilities, there might be, 5 or 6 of these. Some facilities, there might be more, but there are generally assigned to each housing unit.
And then if the cameras are not operational in any of those units, they report it to the liaison, who is also a sworn deputy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the sworn deputy is responsible for reporting it to General Services. And do you have any sense, and maybe this is a question that Mr. Frederickson can answer, on a general week, how many cameras are reported inoperable, and how long does it typically take for them to be repaired?
I don't have it. Oops, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, from my understanding, cameras being inoperable was generally not a common occurrence. I know there have been some incidents that make it seem like that's the case, but when I was working on the line, it was generally not very common for cameras to be inoperable. However, I'll defer the remainder of that question to General Services.
Yeah, I can't tell you on a weekly basis how many cameras are reported inoperable, but I can tell you it is a relatively small number, because in the past year we had only about 92 maintenance requests across the entire across all of the detention facilities. So that's and that's not necessarily for camera failure. It could be a camera was bumped out of alignment, or There might have been some debris on a lens, that kind of thing. So they weren't all failures, but it was only, and of those 92 requests or maintenance issues, 60 of those were rectified the same day. So it was not a real high number of failure and a very high number of repair on the very first day.
May I ask one more question, Chair Youngfish, and then I will yield to my fellow members. The grand jury report, I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the year that, but we discussed it at a prior meeting a couple of months ago. That grand jury report recommended that the system be fully upgraded in all of the facilities, the detention facilities. I'm wondering if that happened or if it's scheduled to happen, and if so, when? I'm not sure who's most appropriate to answer the question.
From the general service perspective, we don't have a project currently for that. I'd have to defer to the Sheriff's Department for any plans that they have for upgrade.
Do you know, Sergeant Dennis?
Yeah, I know there has been a lot of talk about it, and I can get an official response for you on that. I don't have a good answer or all the information for you right now. However, we can get a response from our command and send that your way.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I will turn then to Ms. Keena Ayub.
Hello, thank you. Most of my questions were asked by Commissioner Pintar, but I also wanted to circle back to Mr. Meyer's question about what the priority status is on fixing a camera. I would assume it's high, not just for the safety of the inmates, but the safety of the officers on scene. And you stated that it's different in each facility. How does it differ with each facility?
When I stated it's different at each facility, that's just how the operations deputy or the person responsible for entering the information into TRIREGA is notified. So some facilities might do it only by email. Some facilities might do it by phone and email. And one of our facilities, South Bay, which is one of our smaller facilities, the administrative secretary is responsible for entering the information in TRIREGA. So it's just on how the information makes it into TRIREGA that's unique per facility.
Thank you. And what's the priority status on those?
And I wouldn't be able to speak to that. I'll have to defer to general services on that.
I can answer that question. I look back just for the past 3 years, and all of the camera requests came in as a priority one, or in other words, a high priority.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then unless Ms. Keena Ayub has any further questions, I'll turn then to Mr. Ware.
Thank you. I think my question was answered also by Ms. Keena Ayub, her question on the difference on the process of reporting the maintenance. And I just had to, because my question was going to be for both gentlemen. First of all, why is there a difference from each institution? And if Mr. Ferguson saw that there's a difference in how he receives the request, and if whatever that the best request is, why don't we go with that? But I think it's clear that it's not that major on how they do it. So unless either one of the gentlemen want to address that, I'm fine with what I heard.
Okay, I don't hear a response from any further response. And so with that, I will then move on to Mr. Wilson.
Yes. How many emergency requests were received to repair a camera in the last 3 years?
I'm sorry that I don't have that. I just went back and looked at the last year. So the last year there were 92 but I don't have, we could get that information, but I don't have it with me.
Okay. Who determines the acceptable failure rate? For me, if I have a camera's not working, we have a death investigation. To me, that's catastrophic. One may not be much in terms of looking at it in paper, but saying that 92 is a low failure rate, who determines that?
I can just tell you from the large volume of cameras that are out there and the harsh environment in which those cameras live, that number of issues. And like I say, those aren't all complete failures. Those are sometimes just a camera was out of focus, or it wasn't a failure, but it was just a camera was bumped or moved or had something thrown on it that covered, caused it to be, not the picture that they would normally want to see. So that's just what we're going by. We're not looking at catastrophic numbers of cameras that are dropping offline. It's simply, those are just maintenance requests to adjust, repair, or in some cases, replace cameras.
Would you not agree that a catastrophic failure of one camera during a death investigation is noteworthy?
It very well could be. Yes.
Yeah. What time of day and what days of the week do you get most of the failures?
I'm sorry, I don't have the times of the days. That we just get the calls when they're reported to us. So what time those cameras dropped off, I don't have that information.
Would it be possible to get more granular information so we can get a better handle on the data to solve this problem?
We do have more information available through our TRIRIGA system.
When they do their daily checks of the cameras, I think this would probably be for Sergeant Dennis. How's that documented and kept in an official record?
So there is an area activity checklist log that they do within the jail information management system. And that is where they check their safety equipment and general things throughout the floor. And it's within that area activity checklist that's documented.
Does that indicate which deputy checked the camera and when?
There is a timestamp when the entry is made that has a deputy's name on it. So the deputy making the entry would be assumed to be the person that checked it. And then there's a timestamp when they put that in our jail information management system.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wilson, is that it all, or do you have further questions? That's it. Okay. Ms. Domingos, I did see your hand go up for a minute and it looks like you went back down. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I did have a question for I can't pronounce the last name properly, but Mr. Ken F. regarding the cameras. And it was, you had used a term saying 92% was good, especially because of the harsh conditions. I would just like a little bit more clarification in regards to what you mean by harsh conditions.
So when I say harsh conditions, I'm talking about, in some cases, you have cameras that are located exterior to buildings, so they're subject to cold, heat, rain, wind, all those kinds of things. Also, anytime you have cameras in an inmate facility, inmates will try to do things to prevent themselves from being on video. And so those can be harsh conditions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Ware, do you still have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on and sharing with us. We really appreciate this. Obviously, this is a very important topic to us and all of our San Diego County residents. The question I have for you is that we're frustrated with the camera system and we're not experts. And you guys are experts in this area. Sergeant Dennis, I don't know if you're an expert in the camera piece, but do you guys have a sense of frustration? You see this every day. Are you frustrated? And if so, how do you think we can better this process, this system?
I would first like to add, mention our body worn camera program that we have rolling out in detentions. So we're doing a pilot program that's starting in Las Colinas that's putting worn cameras on our deputies within the jails. And as that continues to expand throughout the rest of our facilities, you're going to see a lot more video footage, exponentially more video footage. And it is my understanding, I cannot speak for our command on this, but from the conversations that I've had, it is a priority for us to upgrade our camera systems in some of our older facilities. However, there are many things that need to be upgraded and changed, and money is a consideration, and also our staffing. So one of the things that we need to do, or not staffing, our population. So big maintenance projects are planned at our Vista Detention Facility and our George Bailey Detention Facility. And that is going to involve us emptying modules to do large maintenance projects. And in order for us to empty modules, we have to have our Rock Mountain facility opened or have some sort of space that we can adjust our population to. So there are plans in the works for upgrading systems. And I definitely believe the body worn camera system will give us a much better view, or give you a much better view on incidents.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Ferguson, how long have you been in your position?
I've been with the county now. I'm starting my 39th year. I started off in electronic security as a technician, became the senior, then became a facility support manager, and I'm also the DGS security manager. And so I've been a facility support manager for about 15 years now.
All right, so you are a true expert in this area. My last question for you is that in all these years and all the different programs and systems and adjustments you guys have made, and then you were asked to come on here and speak to us, was there something inside of you that said, you know what, if we only would do this and do this and do this, then we would have these meetings? Can you share if you had that thought, and what is that this?
Really, I'm not frustrated. I think the county has come leaps and bounds since I first started. We had very limited camera coverage, in a lot of cases, no camera coverage. So the amount of cameras has grown dramatically, and the placement of those cameras has been improved over the years. I think my only frustration is right now is the difficulty that we have in getting materials and parts because of the issues with COVID and chips. It's kind of like the frustration people have right now trying to buy a car. You can't get things as easily as you would like. It stalls some of our projects. And I'm frustrated with the cost. The cost of camera systems is very, very high. The requirements for having we need to have a lot of recording time, a lot of video storage, and it's very expensive. And that's the frustrating part. It's just the cost of doing what we want to do is very, very high.
Well, gentlemen, thank you again for both of you guys coming on and representing your area and your agency, because you could have found something else to do tonight. And we appreciate you being upstanding and coming on and answer these questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we just have a few more. So again, I'm not sure if it was Ms. Pintar or Ms. Domingos first. I'll go ahead and call Ms. Pintar and then Ms. Domingos. Ms. Pintar?
Yeah, I just a couple of comments and to closing comments, I guess, for me. But I would just say I very much appreciate the body worn camera program that Sergeant Dennis raised. I think we all think it's a really important step. And I appreciate you raising it here. But I wonder, well, I don't wonder. I don't think it is a substitute. They are not a substitute for the cameras that are in the cells. Because to me, it seems like the cameras that are there in the facilities themselves are a really important tool for, once the investigations that we are doing and the materials that we're looking at. And the reason this has come up so many times in these meetings in the past, and the reason we asked for this update in this report is because of the number of times that we are reviewing these investigations and there is a problem with the camera. The footage isn't clear, or The camera has been inoperable. I'm relatively new to the board, and the number of times I've seen inoperable camera as part of these reports is why we're having this conversation. So I'd appreciate, Sergeant Dennis, if you could get back to us about what is being done in terms of a system-wide upgrade. I just, again, think it's important. I know that the entire board has expressed this frustration, so I think we're very interested in it. And I also would just say, I think that by Sergeant Dennis's remarks tonight, we've established that this is something we have jurisdiction over. I know that was a discussion that has happened in the past, in some of our past meetings, but it is a sworn deputy that is, communicating when the cameras are broken and reporting to general services when things need to be repaired. So I think this is something we're going to have our eyes on going forward. So thank you both again.
Thank you, Ms. Pintar. Ms. Domingos.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak again. I would like to thank everybody who has come to address questions and concerns that we've had for months or several weeks. I would like to make a comment and take full responsibility for the comment that I am about to make. And I have not met or conferred with any board member regarding this comment that I would like to make. And I wrote it down to make it very short and precise, because while everybody was speaking about the cameras, I needed to collect my words. I do not want us to lose sight of the main issue, which in my opinion is the high number of in-custody deaths in detention centers. Though cameras could be a reliable means to hold sworn officers accountable in detention centers, I'm concerned that our focus has been fundamentally shifted from sworn officer practice in detention centers to faulty cameras. I do have an issue with that, and I would like us to somehow refocus our energies. I fully appreciate how important cameras are, but we have a serious problem, and we have people dying now, not monthly, but weekly in detention centers. And we can have amazing functioning cameras, but if people continue to die, those cameras are, in my opinion, not a useful tool. That's my concern.
Okay, is there anything else, Ms. Domingos?
That's it, thank you.
All right. Are there any other board member comments or questions? And I just had a quick question for Mr. Frederickson, just to put it into perspective for me. I know you stated there was 92 service requests, and I believe, was it the last year or 6 months?
Yeah, that's correct. We had 92 maintenance requests, what I call regular maintenance requests, not preventive. These were maintenance requests in the past calendar year.
And you stated there was a large number of in total of cameras. What is a large number, if you can estimate the number?
You know, I'm not real comfortable giving out camera numbers and information. I think that information could jeopardize security at the facility, and it could put inmates, staff, and officers and visitors at risk. So I'm not sure if that's a question that I should answer. Just the number of cameras at our facilities.
Could you answer if 92 would be approximately 1%, or are you comfortable giving a percentage? You're saying that's such a small number. I'm just trying to get perspective, because that's a very subjective term as far as large versus small, you know.
I think the best way to put it is that our facilities do have pretty good coverage in total, so that if you are entering in the facility and the exterior of the facilities, all have very good camera coverage. But to give a number, I think might not be in the best interest of the safety of the facility.
Okay, I understand, and I'm certainly not trying to jeopardize anyone. I was just trying to get a better understanding. Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Frederickson, I understand your concern for operational security, and I commend you for that. Would you be willing to provide, or the board would like to have it in writing, and provide it to our executive officer. And we certainly handle law enforcement sensitive information. We have a closed session that we could look at this in.
Yeah, I mean, upon advice from county council and maybe with sheriff's permission, we could provide those numbers. We do. So we'd have to take a look at that. But I mean, the numbers are available. It's just a matter of in what format that they would be produced. I'm certainly not trying to impede any investigation. I just have a genuine concern for safety and not just with detention facilities, but all county facilities. I don't like to give out location and number of cameras.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. I appreciate that. The concern for operational security. I would like to see those numbers and get an idea what those numbers look like. So if we could possibly get that in writing and give it to our executive officer, it would be certainly appreciated.
I'll bring that up with my management and with our county council and see how we can accommodate those requests.
Thank you, Mr. Frederickson. Mr. Ware.
Yeah, thank you, madam. I was just wanted to respond to my colleague, Mr. Domingos' response, because I really appreciate that. But I understand that we have people dying in custody, and when that happens, it's all hands on deck. So whatever resources we can tap into, we can address. In this case, we're talking about those cameras. Those cameras are a form of accountability for visitors, for inmates, and for deputies. And so if that's going to bring more accountability, it's going to stop those, whatever we can do, let's put it all on the table. And so I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay. And then I understand from Mr. Parker that we do have a further public comment as well.
We do have a public comment and then actually we have two. So I'll start with Debbie Cortell. Debbie?
Thank you so much for hearing me again. Hopefully you can hear me. As a data professional, I had questions, but I understand that you may not have the answers to this, but it's more of a thought out loud. As I was hearing the wonderful presentation by Sergeant Dennis and Mr. Aked Frederickson. And so if you may allow me to just throw these out here, and again, you may not have answers, but it's just for everyone to consider. When you mentioned about the equipment maintenance, I was just wondering, is there information about that is available to the general public? Not so much as what specific equipment, but just trending type of information. You mentioned about things not being exactly a failure, but things out of focus. Are there reportings that show those types of exceptions and trending that show, even if it is same day, it may have been an important part of the day where maybe there are patterns where certain things keep getting bumped out of focus or things getting in the way of focus. That might provide some information where it's happening with certain individuals more so than others. So those types of exception reports, again, the general public doesn't need to know specific people, but if there's patterns or trends that internally, does the department have that type of reporting available for you guys to use? And is that being used? Also, individual logins. I know sometimes at jobs, you're supposed to have secure individual logins. So when you're reporting these maintenance and logging them in, that's not always done. So is there a possibility for shared logins for someone else to log in and maybe document all of this all in one day? The reason why I ask that is because if that's not being enforced, then the ability for all of that information to go into the system, it's very easily to say, well, we really don't know who was logging in that because we all share that login and we're all reporting that. So then there's no accountability for that information that's being logged in on a daily basis. And then I think my other question is, when it comes to your reporting, is it just we did 10, we did 20, or is there ratios that show, okay, if the only time that we are checking the equipment is at the 6 months interval or at this other interval, and it is supposed to be used 98% of the other time, what trending or reporting is available to show this officer or this person is using it 100% of that available time. So those are my questions, is just what kind of proactive trending and reporting are you doing to capture the gaps that possibly could be had to prevent some of this stuff? So that's just my thinking out loud that I want to present to you, that if you don't already have these types of measures, how can you put those in place, and what systems or what gaps in your equipment or departments is needed, and how can the public help to get those in place? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Your time starts now.
Okay. I just would like to know if it's possible to get an accurate, timely cause of death from the medical examiner once something like that happens, because although I know the deputies have a very challenging position in the work, the population that they are sworn to protect, I know that's all very challenging. I just want to know if is it possible to get an accurate timing, immediate, how fast can we get the, does that depend on the county coroner, or how can we get that information more rapidly than we currently do, instead of just saying the county jail or the San Diego County Sheriff? And I would like to see more data, like the young lady said, who arrested them, where were they arrested, and when they died, and what was the actual cause of death by the medical examiner. So we would have the data. And there's some other things I would like to discuss with you later.
Dr. Brown,
But
I don't want to cut you off. However, the public comment is specifically on the presentation training, which is agenda item number 4 regarding the camera facility.
Okay.
Do you have public?
No. I just want to, ask for that, and that's it. That was it. I apologize.
Thank you. Mr. Parker, do we have other public comment?
No.
Okay, and is there any further board member comment for Mr. or questions for Mr. Frederickson or Sergeant Dennis? Okay, seeing none, I thank you, Mr. Frederickson and Sergeant Dennis, for your time here tonight and your in-depth report and fielding all the questions and comments from the board.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on then to the executive officer's report, I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Chair Youngflesh. I will try to make this brief since we have a lengthy agenda. So on March 9th, 16th, and 18th, I was a panelist for the San Diego County's Office of Labor Standards and Enforcement. It's a brand new office for their group program manager interviews. On March 16th, I attended the Leanna L. Williams Human Relations Commission's Policies and Procedures Subcommittee and provided a lot of information about CLERB and answered a lot of questions. There's a lot of interest in CLERB, but a lot of information still not getting out there despite our continued community outreach, and so we're still dedicated to that. On March 22nd, as we all know, CLERB hosted its second virtual town hall pertaining to the California State Auditor's report on San Diego County Sheriff's Department, CLERB, and in-custody deaths in general, of course. I believe the town hall was well attended and informative. It provided community members a forum in which to express their concerns and ideas and enter into some dialogue, which we can't do during these regular meetings. So I was very much appreciative of that. On March 28th, I met with representatives from pillars of the community. They had several very good ideas on how we can improve our practices, how we can improve our internal operations, website, accessibility, things along those lines. So I was very appreciative for that meeting. On March 29th, I attended the State of the County address. On April 7th, I attended as a community member only the San Diego County, or the San Diego Racial Justice Coalition's town hall. It was very well done. It was pertaining to the California State Auditor's report, and had an opportunity to chime in a little bit about CLERB and its role and whatnot. Last Friday, I met with Andrea St. Julian from San Diegans for Justice. She was wanting an update on our actions in reference to San Diegans for Justice's report pertaining to CLERB, and that's going to be discussed as an update later on in the agenda. We still technically have 3 CLERB member vacancies. We've had them for months. District 1, they're still reviewing applications for their vacancy. Chair Youngflesh, again, needs to be commended. She's filling in right now. Her term ended last June, actually July 1st. She could have easily stepped away at the most critical time for CLERB, where we're discussing the most critical of topics, and she chose not to. So we're still waiting for her replacement to be named. And then District 3 are still conducting interviews for its vacancy. That's my understanding. I'm hopeful we'll get some movement here so that we can get a full board. It's needed now more than ever. As far as the investigative workload and classification report for March of 2022, which is attachment B, you'll see that last month was the busiest month probably that CLERB's had over the last couple of years. We had 22 new cases as compared to 12 for March of last year. Tonight, as you can see, due to just the work and the prioritization of our staff, you always get people on and talk about the people that they work with and give them all the kudos in the world, but I mean it. This is a lot of work that our folks are doing under very difficult circumstances, under changing times, and they're all up for the challenge. They all see exactly why we're here and are committed to moving forward. We have 10 cases on tonight's agenda to include 4 death cases, 2 great bodily injury cases. And normally in a year, CLERB makes about 12 recommendations, 12 to 15. And tonight, we have 14 alone tonight, 14 policy recommendations, 4 of which are related to cases. Some of them are very, very controversial recommendations that we must discuss in closed session first and see what we can do as we move forward. At the end of March, there were 87 active cases, 10 of which we don't have signed complaints for, 77 obviously we did. We had 32 open death cases at the end of March. We had documents for 16, and we're waiting documents on the other 16. Again, four death cases are on tonight's agenda. Unheard of. Difficult cases with policy recommendations associated. There were 4 new death cases in March. One was related, I apologize, 3 were related to San Diego Central Jail, and 1 was a deputy-involved shooting in Little Italy involving the courts personnel. There are 13 open uses of force resulting in great bodily injury without a signed complaint. 4 of those were reported in March, and 2 are on tonight's agenda. There are 3 open discharges of firearm without a complaint, and 1 use of force at a protest or First Amendment protected event without a complaint. One thing I did fail to mention was in reference to I want to talk about 2 things in the executive officer's report about in custody deaths. Now, I don't know if the Sheriff's Department I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but they're doing it in an effort to be transparent. For example, there was a compassionately released person. Those people who are compassionately released from custody and then die technically are not in custody under the state definition. And technically, to my understanding, do not have to be reported to the state. So the department can just say, wasn't in custody, they died, not in custody, we're not going to report it. Well, what they are doing is publicly they are putting out the notification to the public saying someone was compassionately released and died. They're letting CLERB know. And on the most recent one, they actually made it and filed it as an in-custody death with the state. I think that needs to be noted because that's, I don't even know if that's the right thing for them to do as far as data, right? Because other entities aren't doing that, but they are, and that's going above and beyond. So I think that needs to be called out. And in reference to deaths, the medical examiner himself, Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Cameron, has committed to coming to our May meeting to give an overview of what his role is. I know there's concern from members of the public that the Sheriff's Department and Medical Examiner's Department are in cahoots, Medical Examiner's Office are in cahoots, and they're not really independent and whatnot. And Dr. Cameron wants to come and have the opportunity to talk to you folks, talk to the public. And so I look forward to that. That'll be next month. In reference to our case status, progress and status report, which is attachment C, look, we have a lot of cases on tonight's agenda. You can see that they're prioritized appropriately. I'm not really going to dive into that. I only sent 1 media article compilation last month to CLERB with everything else we had going on. So 6 articles went out. We are waiting for policy recommendation responses on 3 cases from the Sheriff's Department, 1 of which they don't have yet. They don't have a recommendation yet, official in writing. We have 14 tonight or 13 to the Sheriff's Department, so we'll get them all at the same time. The Probation Department has one about our response to death scenes. And I've been talking to the Probation Department about this. I know that they're actively working on the response and are, in general, my understanding, supportive of it. So I look forward to getting their response rather soon. And really, that's all I have for the executive officer's report, unless anybody has any questions.
Do any board members have any questions for Mr. Parker? Okay, Mr. Ware?
No, I really just have just a comment, really. Just want to clarify, Mr. Parker, because I know you have an awesome staff. So you've had a number of cases, I think you said bodily injury cases that were reported last month, and now they're on the agenda for today. That's pretty fast.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to give you that impression. We had 4 that were reported last month, and just so happens we have 4 that are on tonight's agenda. Or actually, we have 2 that are on tonight's agenda, not the same cases.
Okay, thank you.
They're good, but we'll get there. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to get there. We're not going to be that fast. So but we're, yeah. Next.
Thank you.
All right.
But they're still awesome. They're still awesome, though.
There's no doubt about that. And before we go to Mr. Wilson, Chair Youngflesh, I also wanted to point out in reference to be clear, in reference to the death responses, I probably should update every month. So there were 4 deaths last month, and in reference to our response to those, we get notified. The Sheriff's Department has been notifying us. The Sheriff's Department has actually been notified us one time when the person wasn't yet dead, because that's what our MOU, they are willing to do that. But I want to make clear that I've been responding to every death except 1. And that was, and I know there was talk about, well, why are they not responding? What's going on? And so basically, this person was injured in custody. I was notified at the time he was injured. We don't have jurisdiction at that time for me to go and do anything, but they notified us. When he died, he had been compassionately released, was in a hospital. I was notified that he died. I did not respond to the hospital. I would not have been able to obtain much information there or have access to look at him, just for obvious legal reasons and whatnot at that hospital. But I immediately met with the Sheriff's Department people, personnel, and received the brief. So I just want to make clear, if you see in the media or the press releases that CLERB has not responded, that's going to be few and far between, but there'll be legitimate reasons for that, just to be clear to the board. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
I'd like to ask Mr. Parker, what's the forecast for getting you some clerical help, particularly with the workload that you're all experiencing?
That's a wonderful question, and I wish I could give you a definitive answer. We're working through that issue right now, and because there are personnel matters involved, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just don't want to overstep my bounds. It's a priority for me to make sure that we have administrative assistance. So just know that that's where we are with that. Okay.
Right. I'd like to note that you're doing all the administration at the present time. It's a one-man show, and we need to figure out how we can help you get clerical help, because you need it very badly.
Well, to clarify, we do have some assistance. We're working through making that a full-time situation. I hope to have more at the next board meeting to give you some information on.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Ware?
Along the same lines, Mr. Parker, are we training up individuals to be able to, so you can take a vacation and they can respond to those situations all hours of the night? Are we training people right now? And if so, when is that training going to lead them to relieve you?
No, as of this moment, we're not, but there's a reason for that. It's not because I'm selfish or anything like that. Sometimes I can be, but in reference to this, I want to have some consistency. This is a brand new arrangement. This is something that I think if the department sees the same person, and it's the executive officer who has the ability to dialogue with the department to maybe make some changes to how we do this to make it the best possible. That's why I'm doing this. At this time, no, we have a few investigators who are qualified to do so. And then the other investigators, I want to make sure that we get them the appropriate death investigation, officer involved shooting trainings to get them all up to that point. But I don't see, I was thinking it would take some time, maybe, 10 scene responses or something like that. So we'll see. But hopefully that answers the question and the reason why it's important. It's important to all of us. Staff want to go, but they understand why it's just me for now.
Yeah, I don't like the answer because you're too valuable for us to have you wear yourself out, and then what? So for that reason, I don't like that answer. I would prefer to have to start working people in so we can be strong in all areas. And but I understand why you're doing it, but I just don't want to lose you and because you're worn out.
I appreciate the concern, Mr. Ware. I truly do. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Ware. You're doing an incredible job, Mr. Parker. We just don't want to lose you and have you go down hard. So please try to find some time to get a little rest in.
Mr. Wilson, thank you for your concern. It's good to have bosses who care about their employees. So thank you. Chair Youngflesh, we have one public comment in reference to the executive officer report.
Okay, I don't see any other board member comments or questions, so please call the public comment.
Ms. Williamson, Tasha Williamson, are you there?
Hello?
Are you? Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned at some of the articles you reported on and talked about one of the inmates who was compassionately released. I'm concerned as to how deputies are or may be negligent in putting someone who is violent with someone who may not have had a violent tag put on them, or someone who is considered assaultive, I guess. And then most recently, I guess I'm going to need support with getting an application in the process for the most recent in custody death that the media has had misinformation on. And so I would like to put forward a third party complaint because there's no way possible this should have happened. There's also another death, or I'm sorry, another incident that has occurred that I did not hear you talk about. And we are, this family is very afraid that their loved one will be the next in custody death. So I'm hoping that somebody from your office or you will be able to help us figure out how to get him medical attention. His mother saw him today and he is pale. He has had a head injury. And I shouldn't be the person that's being contacted when we have people within the sheriff's department who should be doing their job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson.
Is there any further public comment?
I'm sorry, no, I don't see any.
Okay, thank you. Then agenda item number 6 is the board chair report. I don't have anything to add other than to thank the liaisons that are here tonight. And again, to thank Mr. Fredrickson and Sergeant Dennis for their presentation earlier, and to thank all the public comment that we've received and participation in the town hall from the board members and the public. I'll move on to new business, which is agenda item number 7. And 7A specifically is the continuance of teleconferencing meeting option pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. As we've done consistently through the past meetings, this is to continue to have our meetings done over a virtual platform such as tonight. I know that there's specific language that County Council has asked we include in the motion. And so prior to making a motion or asking for a motion be met, I would ask Ms. Razzo to read in the specific language for the motion.
Yes, the language for the motion is pursuant to Government Code Section 54953. subsection E, subsection 3, a motion to find the legislative body has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and state and local officials continue to recommend measures to promote social distancing.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Razo. And with that, do I hear a motion that would include that language to continue teleconferencing? A motion has been made by Ms. Keen Ayub. Is there a second? Seconded by Pastor Spriggs. And with that, would you mind calling roll, Pastor Spriggs?
Yes. Susan Youngflesh,
Yes.
Eileen Delaney.
Pastor Spriggs, she had to leave.
Okay, thank you. Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub, Nadia
Yes,
Keen Ayub.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't
That's okay.
unmute.
That's fine. Mary Ann Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
okay, and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
All right.
And motion carries. Moving on to 7B, recognition of James Sandler, who is our outside counsel and he is retiring. I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Parker.
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Sandler could not make it tonight. He wanted to be here. He's in trial all week, and he was unable to make it. So what I would like to do, because I believe it's so important, I would like permission to, I'd like you folks to allow me to put this on next month's agenda. I don't want to just go forward without him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Do we need to do this by motion?
Yes, if you would be a motion to continue and voted on.
Okay, so the motion is made by Mr. Wilson and seconded by Ms. Pintar. Pastor Spriggs, would you do the honors and call roll again?
Yes. Susan Youngflesh,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Mary Ann Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to 7C, we will now introduce and welcome our new counsel, Mr. Dwayne Bennett. And again, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Chair Youngflesh. Mr. Bennett, thank you so very much for hanging here with us. I think it's been a great opportunity for you to see some of the issues that we are facing. What I'd like to do, Mr. Bennett, with your approval is I want to read the bio that I have on you and then turn the floor over to you. Would that be okay with you, sir? All right. Dwayne Bennett is a former city attorney for the city of Oceanside and retired general counsel for the Port of San Diego. He's also served as an assistant city attorney, police legal advisor, and criminal prosecutor with broad-based legal experience in civil rights, civil litigation, contracts, employment, environmental, public liability, and real property. Since retiring from the Port of San Diego in 2012, he's expanded his private law practice and is an experienced arbitrator, mediator, and litigator, handling employment and commercial disputes involving governmental agencies, financial institutions, etc. He currently arbitrates and mediates for the American Arbitration Association, County of Riverside, Riverside County Sheriff's Association, and San Bernardino Civil Service Commission. He also serves as a hearing officer for employee retirement associations in several counties. He has advised and represented several law enforcement agencies and served as an instructor and consultant for numerous law enforcement and public safety agencies, including several police departments in California. He has also served as a legal advisor for fire departments in the city of Oceanside, Santa Ana, and Vista, served as an instructor at police and fire academies through Southern California, in Arizona, Illinois, Iowa, and Indiana. What's really interesting about Mr. Bennett is he has litigated several matters related to civil rights, due process, and equal protection. He's been involved in several civil rights actions involving police departments and public safety agencies. His work has included constitutional claims for violations of the 4th, 5th, 8th, and 14th Amendments. So he's an adjunct professor right now at California Western School of Law, actually not right now, California Western School of Law from 2009 to 2016, and has also served on teaching faculties for the National College of District Attorneys and National Association of Attorneys General. I think you can agree that he has broad-based experience, not just on the police side, but on the civil rights side, on both sides. I mean, we could not have asked for a better candidate to walk through this door and throw his hat into the ring to guide us through this very, very trying, very difficult time. So, Mr. Bennett, I am thrilled that you are here. I'm certain that the board will be too, and our members of the community will be as well, knowing your extensive background. With that, if you want to say a few words, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Parker, and board, thank you so much for welcoming me. It's been an honor to work. It will be an honor to work with you and try to fill or help fill the shoes of Mr. Sandler in his office. Thank you, Ms. Razzo, and for County Council's confidence in me. I called myself retiring in 2012. And I think that a position like this and what you all are discussing is so awesome, just to see the passion that you have and the interest and the intellect you have on the subject is absolutely fantastic. As I think about my career, the thing that got me into policing was my near-death experience at the hands of the Los Angeles Police Department in 1985 and 86, when I was a criminal prosecutor. Driving while Black is real. Black Lives Matter or Black Lives Don't Matter is real. And that night in 1985, as I was held by gunpoint, handcuffed, thrown to the curb, had a gun stuck to my back, I realized that my Black life did not matter. And that's what made me passionate about civil rights and about getting into this. My first police department experience was working with the Santa Ana Police Department, where we had 25 shoots a year. We stayed in state and federal court trying to deal with those types of issues. And actually, I don't know if I didn't tell Mr. Parker and Ms. Razzo when I talked to them, what actually brought me to San Diego was problems with the Oceanside Police Department. They needed somebody who understood policing to help with the Oceanside Police Department. It's rare that African-American attorneys are on this side and have seen this side of the defense aspect of working with police departments and sheriff's departments. But I figured that getting on the inside and trying to understand policing from that perspective was something that was unique and was needed. At the same time, I saw a lot of problems with law enforcement. You know, I almost was killed by LAPD, so I know it's real and I know it happens to a lot of people, particularly people of color. But you know, the highlight of my career was my involvement in the Rodney King action against the city of Los Angeles. I was one of Rodney King's civil rights attorneys, and I'm proud of it. And we were successful in changing some things that happened in the Los Angeles Police Department. And listening to what you all have discussed today regarding the in-custody deaths in the county reminds me of a lawsuit that I was involved in several other, approximately 2016. And you may have heard about it. It was the case of an African-American man in the state of Florida who was in custody, and he had mental disabilities, as many people have discussed. He had some mental challenges and some disability, got into some hygiene issues, and correctional deputies got upset with him. And so they threw him in the shower and they locked him in and they turned the water up to scalding, and they accidentally left him in there for hours. And he was basically scalded, or as I say, boiled to death. That was one of the cases that I was involved in from the standpoint of bringing an action against the state of Florida for his death. It's very, very unfortunate. But you know, when you go back and you look at what is happening in law enforcement, and I trust that that would never happen in the county of San Diego, but it does happen, and it has happened to people. And it's something that needs to be corrected. So as a person who believes in law enforcement and who knows that most of the officials out there are great and do a great job, you have to be honest that there are some problems that need to be corrected. And I have basically dedicated a large part of my career to doing that. I should be retired and just should go away somewhere, but for some reason, yeah, I have this passion, I have the experience, I've been doing this, I've been practicing law now for going on 39 years. And so I understand this aspect, and somebody needs to give a voice to those who don't see the full perspective and may not have the power to do so. So I'm really, really honored to be here with you. I trust that I can be of assistance in your mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I think I speak on behalf of CLERB when I say that we're very excited to get to work with you and get to know you better. And I think you sound like a wonderful attorney and person, and we know that you'll provide us with excellent guidance and representation in the future.
Gary Youngflesh, there is one public comment.
Okay. I would ask that, Mr. Parker, can you please go ahead and call the public comment then?
Ms. Maxwell, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good evening. Francine Maxwell, Southeastern San Diego resident. I'm happy to know that he's here as well as the attorney of record for the CPP for San Diego. So I would encourage the CLERB to maybe look at where we can have a town hall to make sure that we're all doing some interaction, because it's all going to be a heavy lift, no matter if it's CLERB or if it's the CPP for the city of San Diego. I think that both of us are very lucky and we got the right one, that we can really get some things done. And so I think if we have a town hall, because all of us work together in a lot of different areas throughout the county of San Diego, and if we're on one accord, we can move this train a lot faster. So welcome. I look forward to sitting in dialogue with the attorney. And the county and the city of San Diego got it right this time.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. That's the only public comment. Oh, wait a minute, I apologize. Mr. Miller, Yusef Miller.
I would like also to say, my name is Yusef Miller with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition and the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. And I would also like to welcome Mr. Bennett. Just listening to your background is refreshing, exciting, and I think we can all do some positive work together. That work that is already being done by CLERB. I am sure that you can help accelerate that in a positive way. Welcome aboard.
You're on mute, Mr. Parker.
Happens all the time. Thank you, Mr. Miller. And next we'll go to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown.
Mr. Bennett, I would like to echo the previous two individuals. Know that we appreciate you and we're looking forward to working with you. I'm not associated with any specific organization. However, I love doing research and peer reviews. So welcome aboard. And I like to volunteer for special projects. Please know that I'm someone that will be, you can call on me if you ever need me to help you out with something.
Chair Youngflesh, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Do any board members have any comments or questions of Mr. Bennett? Mr. Ware?
Yeah, I'd just like to know, what's the earliest I can have lunch with Mr. Bennett? That's all I need to know. I can listen to him all day. He's from LA too, so we have something in common. I'll catch up with him. Thank you.
And Mr. Wilson?
I'd like to personally welcome Mr. Bennett, and I look forward to any input or advice that you have for the board. And if you have lunch with Tim Ware, I'd like to be there and he's buying.
Pastor Spriggs.
Yes, I'd like to echo, being that I am the younger of those two gentlemen, I would love to join in on the lunch and they'll be paying for it. But welcome. I'm really glad that you are here. You are an answered prayer, sir. So just want you to know that. Thank you for your service.
Mr. Ware, your hand's still up. Okay. Are there any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, thank you again, Mr. Bennett. I will go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. Please feel free to stay with us for the rest of the meeting or feel free to go, whatever you so choose to do. Agenda item number 7D, policy recommendations to SDSD, minimize racially disparate policing practices, attachment E. Mr. Parker, would you mind addressing this?
Sure. And if the racial disparity, racial profiling, and implicit bias ad hoc committee members do not mind, I can do the brief overview and we'll go from there. So with that, on behalf of, let me just give you the background, then I'll name the members. In October of 2021, November of 2021, we asked for public input into the investigation of racial discrimination allegations. That was, we wanted to know how to investigate this. We wanted the public to weigh in. We wanted their opinion. It was discovered during this time. I mean, a lot of members of the community knew about the Campaign Zero report, but it was brought up during this time. And then afterwards, the San Diego Sheriff's Department commissioned its own report from the Centers for Policing Equity. Both reports revealed obvious racially disparate numbers. The data indicated there was racial disparity. As you know, that doesn't necessarily indicate that there's racial profiling, but it did obviously say that there's racially disparate practices. So based upon those reports, CLERB created this ad hoc committee to address it for the purpose of providing a plan of action, something concrete from CLERB to the Sheriff's Department on what CLERB believes would be the best way to reduce or eliminate any racially disparate practice. The subcommittee was co-chaired by Buki Domingos and Tim Ware, and was also G.I. Wilson and Bonnie Kank were the other members. So the subcommittee met once a week, every Wednesday, for about 3 months. And what you have in front of you as part of attachment E is the outcome. Now, we know that these recommendations, and I'll go over each of them, we know that they're controversial. We know that, the last thing that we would want to do, first off, we want to deal with the racially disparate concerns. Again, the data indicates that's happening. Members of the community that are here on this call, and even ones who are not, will say, obviously, where you been? We've been saying this for a long time. Now the data seems to reflect that, right? So for a topic as important as this, as contentious as this, as difficult to talk and to have these difficult conversations, we want to start those conversations. And we want to start that now by making the recommendations. Number one, data indicates that persons of color, at least our research indicates that persons of color are subjected to a higher amount of those discretionary stops for low-level offenses, whether they be traffic or otherwise, whether they be expired registration, any kind of equipment violation, no seatbelt, jaywalking, loitering. That's what the data tends to indicate. Persons of color are contacted. As was said at a previous meeting, it all starts with a stop, right? All starts with a stop. So we got to thinking about that. In no way, shape, or form is this subcommittee or myself recommending that the department not enforce laws, because that's what's going to come about, right? And we know that. I mean, it makes sense. I was a former police officer. If somebody would make this recommendation to me, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. You're telling me not to do my job. I understand that. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is to do your job, to look at doing your job in a different way. For example, parking tickets, there's no contact. Red light cameras in some jurisdictions, there's no contact. You're left a citation or you're mailed a citation to the registered owner, there's no contact, but the law is still being enforced. It's exactly what we're saying here. Somehow, some way to consider removing that discretionary practice of making these offenses, because a lot of things tend to indicate that things go wrong from that point. Now, I know as a former police officer, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll be honest about it, right? Why not, right? I mean, I would make these stops all day, every day, because what did the stops usually turn into? I would stop people for low-level offenses because they turned into something else. They turned into drugs, warrants, weapons. So of course you would use what's on the books to get your foot in the door. And I understand that. But to what end? To what cost at this point? And that's where we are as a community. That's where the community is with law enforcement relations. if the actions are disparate and a very high number, there's some data that indicates like 92% of, I mean, like the broken windows theory that doesn't really work, and it only is disparately enforced against persons of color. So this is time to have a conversation, right? So that's why we would want to put that forward. To eliminate stopping or contacting people solely for those lower level traffic offenses, or at very bare minimum, be able to justify if there's not a public safety risk. Because it begins to talk about why is law enforcement here? To get the bad guys. Well, is someone who has an expired registration a bad guy? Or is that just someone who's poor? Granted, you'd say, well, they shouldn't be driving. Okay, I get that. But maybe they're having financial issues, whatever. I'm not going to get into the whole dynamics, but that's why we're making these recommendations, because they're racially disparate, and it's our attempt to try to minimize that. So again, that's number 1A. B would be contacting people solely for those quality of life issues that don't jeopardize public safety. In no way. I mean, if any of these jeopardize public safety, and I'm sure the argument can be made that many of them do in some form or fashion, then we don't want law enforcement looking the other way. Of course not. So we don't want to hear that argument in response, right? I know it's going to impact morale of deputies. That's not the point. The point is not to impact morale and say, oh, we can't do this or that. It's a way to look at things a little differently. So jeopardize public safety, loitering and jaywalking. So that's out there. Now that's number one. Number two, the field operation manual currently exists, subsection B of their manual, of the Sheriff's Department manual. It's policy 1, use of discretion. So all we're asking is that the department add to that these discretionary measures or decisions should be evaluated at all times for whether they result in racially disparate treatment or outcomes. I think it needs to be first and foremost in someone's mind. I get officer safety as again, I don't want to, obviously, officer safety and the safety of the public. But when you're making the decisions, considering what's going on and what has been happening, how do you change just perhaps what may be systemic issues? And it's taking these kind of first, front and center steps, right? Provide justification for a stop or contact on body-worn camera. I know that's being done a lot of times now. But, and if I'm wrong, if it's already in the policy, I apologize in advance to the Sheriff's Department. But on the BWC, the ones we look at, we don't hear the deputy say, I'm contacting this person for such and such. I'm contacting. We haven't seen that. Put that out there. It forces the issue so that they can think and everybody thinks on the same page. Again, not compromising public safety, however. Proactively review BWC footage for the sole purpose. I mean, I know there's the random reviews, but implement something that for the sole purpose of analyzing the interactions with people of color in comparison to people who are white. See if there are issues there. See if there's a level of courtesy or whatnot, or how things are handled. Be proactive about it, tackle it head on, see if you can identify any issues or whatnot. And then finally, I contend, and we contend, obviously, because there exists, in our opinion, a lack of evidence indicating that implicit bias training is effective and sustainable unless you over and over and over and over again. Institute that pre-employment screening for existing implicit and explicit bias. Once you get somebody on the department, it's very difficult to remove that. So the department, I know, is committed to wanting to make sure they have the right people there. So why not, during the course of the psychological evaluation, implement something along these lines? So these are our recommendations. These are the subcommittee's plan to hope to start the dialogue with the department. We know that the department responded to the CPE report, and we know that we asked for a response up above and beyond that. But the department stands by the response to the CPE report. But what needs to be pointed out is nowhere in that CPE report was there any plan of action to address the data that was presented. So Chair Youngflesh, again, very contentious topics. I understand, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And I'd like to open the floor for discussion with the board members. Is there any discussion on this policy recommendation? Because I do believe we need a motion. Is that correct? To put this forward.
Just like any other policy recommendation that you folks do in closed session, case-related ones, you got to let me know that the board is on, that there's approval of this, and then I will draft a letter to the department, and then that starts the dialogue. And then the department has been very, very good about responding to our policy recommendations with whether they're going to implement or not. But it's out there for the public to see their thought process. So yes.
Okay. And we do, if you can refresh my recollection, we do that by motion then to direct you to do that, or we just direct you?
Well, no, I would think there would need to be a vote unless Ms. Razzo tells me otherwise. That's what we do in yes. So please a vote
Yes.
would be.
Yes, especially here, since there's a number of different recommendations, this would be an opportunity for a motion and discussion for the board to agree on the recommendations themselves and also to give direction. So that would be the procedure at this point.
Thank you for reminding me, Ms. Razzo. Then again, I would open the floor to if there's any discussion on this topic.
Has there been a motion at all? The motion would be the first part, and then there would be discussion after a second.
So then, so moved by Mr. Wilson. And the second is by Ms. Keen Ayub. And so prior to taking the vote, is there any discussion? Mr. Ware, do you have a comment?
Yes. In regards to that, we've come to a point to where the status quo is not working. As a matter of fact, the status quo as it relates to policing is not working in our system. And so we definitely have to do something that is not status quo, something that's going to address this situation from a racial disparity standpoint when it comes to law enforcement. If it's going to lead to us being better partners, lead to us having better dialogue, I'm all for it. And if somebody has something better out there for us to do in the name of racial disparity and getting people on the same page and all these different things that we're talking about, I'm up for hearing it.
And Mr. Wilson?
I think that Mr. Parker's preamble to this was exactly on the mark. Nobody is suggesting that we're telling law enforcement not to enforce the law, particularly when it comes to public safety. But as Mr. Ware says, what we've been doing is not working. And it's time that we address the elephant in the room and take this head on and look at other directions. And this is one way of doing that. And I think it's important that we do this. Again, we're not suggesting that law enforcement not enforce the law. I, like Mr. Parker, have been a law enforcement officer. We are suggesting that that there should be better decisions made. There should be ample use of discretion. And we should look at what we've been doing because it's not been working. Thank you.
Are there any other comments, or shall we go ahead and call for the vote?
Chair Youngflesh, you have two members of the public that have requested to speak on this topic.
Okay. And Ms. Razzo, would it be appropriate at this time then to have the public go ahead and speak?
Did we, for the sake of this teleconference opportunity, it's a little difficult to have the public comment a little more clear. Normally it wouldn't be at this juncture, but we should have public comment so we can have it at this time. Yes.
Okay, so I heard yes. So Mr.
Yes,
Parker.
that was a long-winded yes.
Okay.
All right, Dave Myers. Dave Myers.
Thank you. So I applaud the effort at the subcommittee headed by Buki Dominguez on the issue of bringing racial profiling forward. And yes, the system is broken and it needs, what I would strongly encourage, and what I think I kind of heard from Mr. Parker, was a quality assurance type program. So I didn't hear anybody here saying that we should not enforce the law, and I appreciate that. But what has been exampled in the past, and I think most of you read it in the newspaper, is a deputy sheriff that was awarded a taser plaque with 25 hashtag marks. Now, those are data points that I think would be very relevant as to against whom, when, how did it occur? And so I think an actual quality assurance program that's reportable to you, reportable to the public, I think would go a long ways in achieving that transparency that I heard Mr. Parker talking about. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown.
Yes, the Los Angeles Police Department just implemented a system whereby from a use of force standpoint, they have to write up, and that means touching anybody, reaching. I think the same thing should be done for stopping individuals. I think it should be an extensive, somebody should write it up, make it clear, a report on it every time. I'm not saying they should do it, but it can give that consideration. And the other thing, from an implicit bias standpoint, if we want to make sure that the psychologists are cross-culturally competent, because what may be implicit bias to a firm who may have recruited, allowed some of these people to be on the force in the first place, may not qualify to know. So we need some firms or some at least a black psychological psychologist to help us understand, or psychologists of color, and help us understand some cross-cultural implicit biases, challenges, or what have you. So that's my suggestion. I'm not saying that you have to, well, it doesn't mean you have to implement a budget, putting it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chair Youngfuss. We have one more request to speak at this time. And it will be Ms. Maxwell, Francine Maxwell.
Sorry, good evening. Francine Maxwell, Southeastern San Diego. I apologize if I missed it, if we talked about the makeup of the department as it pertains to ethnicities. So one of the things that I was looking at the website, and it showed, remember back in the 80s that all of the classes, graduation class, were nothing but Caucasians. So that meant that all the Caucasians were moving up to the ranks. And so then you start getting later in life, recently, and the numbers for going to the graduation classes are diverse. And so as those people begin to move through the ranks, then hopefully we'll see some different changes in, command staff, leadership, and things like that. So I think that we have to take and look at who are we trying to retrain and also introduce new training. And so just wanted to put that on the table, that I found it, very interesting on when you start looking at 26 years, 27 years of people and the racial makeup. And then recently, within the last maybe 3 years, 4 years, the diversity is just going to be enact change in this department. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair Youngfuss, I have no additional requests to speak. I also want to point out one of the things that we didn't note as far as the subcommittee was the Racial Identity and Profiling Act. The RIPA data is available for the Sheriff's Department. We looked at that as well. The most recent data out there on the website is 2019. We are looking forward to the 2020 and 2021 information, and that's something that we should also be considering as we move forward, what the department is filing with, what the outcome is for the stops as well, and what the state is aware of from the Sheriff's Department. Just thought I'd throw that out there for clarification, that we did look at that, and we will continue to monitor that as we move forward.
Okay. Then if there's no further discussion, I would ask Pastor Spriggs to go ahead and call roll.
Susan Youngfuss,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Buki Domingos,
Yes.
thank you. Nadia Keene Ayub,
Yes.
thank you. Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
thank you. Tim Ware,
Yes.
thank you. And G.I. Wilson,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, with that, motion carries. So we would put forth the policy recommendation, Mr. Parker. And at this point, it's been a little bit over 2 hours. I don't want to be insensitive to the board members' needs. How do people feel about taking a break at this point? I'm fine with moving forward because it is a lengthy agenda, but if people would like to take a brief 5-10 minute break, I wouldn't be opposed to that as well. I'm seeing Mr. Wilson with an enthusiastic yes. And if he's the only one, we can keep going. And Mr. Wilson, you may go. Oh, no, everyone seems to be happy with that. Okay.
No, hold on, Chair Youngflesh. I see two comments from Mr. Mingos and Ms. Kina. I apologize for interrupting you.
Oh, comments?
Their hands were raised to your question apparently, or to your
I
thought.
assume they just were in agreement with that, but
Oh, my bad. Okay.
I could be wrong.
If I
No,
may,
I'm not in agreement. I think we should plow ahead and then take a break, a decent break before we go reopen the closed session. So that way
I
we're
don't think
not,
I'll be able personally to go that far, but I'm happy to go until unfinished business. And Ms. Pintar, did you also have a comment? So Mr. Wilson, I'll probably go through 3 more and then we'll take a break before unfinished business. If you need to excuse yourself, obviously, please do.
just as a point of order, Madam Chair, technically the breaks do require a vote. I know it's a stickler Robert's Rules of Order item, just to point out.
And wow, well, that's the first I've ever heard of that.
I looked into it when this issue came up previously, so.
Huh.
Yes.
Interesting. Even before closed session?
For a break we have a break, and especially given that there has been a noted objection to taking a break, it would be appropriate.
So if I needed to just leave, would I just leave and turn the floor over to Mr. Parker?
If we still had a quorum present, yes, you would be able to leave. This doesn't need to be we can triple check the issue, but this issue previously came up, as you may recall, at a prior meeting. And
I realize that this is, doesn't need to have more floor time, but just procedurally, I'd like to be correct, but I would like to go if I need to go away for a minute.
Yes,
So,
if you need to go,
okay.
if we have a quorum present still, we may continue.
I understand. Okay, then I will move on to agenda item 7I, policy recommendation to San Diego County Probation Department, use of technology to monitor health and safety of inmates. Mr. Parker, are you addressing this or shall I?
Well, Chair Youngflesh, I think we might have skipped a few things here. So the 60-day update to recommendations in the California State Auditor Report is attachment F, and I think that's.
Oh, I apologize. You're right. We are at 7E. I was excited to move on, a little bit too excited apparently. 7E, 60-day update to recommendations in California State Auditor Report 2021, attachment F.
Thank you, Chair Youngflesh. I want to make sure that everyone's in the loop on what we're doing. We had a 60-day report back due to the state for the audit. And so basically I've included that as part of the materials tonight. And just so everyone knows, there were those 6 recommendations. We are working on all of them. We've implemented 1. The one that we've implemented is the prioritization in our policies for death investigations. I'm still working with County Council on the revision of rules and regulations to prioritize investigation of in-custody deaths, revision of rules and regulations for the clarification that in-custody deaths include those classified as natural. So County Council and I are working very, very closely on that. We're still in the process of doing our training manual, and that will be done. My hope is that will be done by the next report. The next report's not till August back to the state. So hopefully we'll make a lot more progress on these. Just some of these take time. Conversations with the Deputy Sheriff's Association. Now that Mr. Bennett is on board, we can move forward with that. Myself and Mr. Bennett meeting with the Deputy Sheriff's Association President and the Deputy Sheriff's Association Council to get that moving. And then otherwise, our annual report and the policy recommendations and demographics on deaths, which we've committed to, a lot of that's in our annual report anyway, but we're going to make sure that it's more robust reporting for our annual report. So that's where we are. That's the update. I think we're making very good progress. It's obviously our priority. Anybody have any questions or concerns?
Okay. Seeing none, I'll move on to 7F.
Okay.
And again,
So,
Mr. Parker.
Yes, this is obviously, this is the major issue. I think it was last February, March, we proposed it. for us as the independent oversight entity to, you had the San Diego Union Tribune with their Dying Behind Bars series, and then you had the Sheriff's Department response to that. So we thought, well, why not have an independent? I'm not saying either one are not independent, but you have two sides. Why not have us as the independent entity responsible for the oversight? This is clearly within our jurisdiction. So CLERB gave us permission. It took several months to move through the county's procurement practice and whatnot to land with a vendor. We did. We landed with Analytica Consulting, and I couldn't be happier with the work that they did. I met with them every week, once a week, every Friday, starting in November until last week. This was a major project for them, and they were all committed to doing it right. So as you can see, we released that report, or they finished it up on the 8th, which was last Friday. We released it, and there were some key findings, right? So I'm going to briefly just go over the findings. As far as the methodology, it was peer reviewed, and it was reviewed, and the methodology is sound. There's always been the question about the methodology. The department takes issue sometimes with the methodology of the data that outside entities are putting together. So we want to make sure that we were as sound as, or that they want to make sure they were as sound as possible. And so it was peer reviewed. You'll see that in the report, that the methodology is sound. So how did they do this? The next item one of the items on the agenda is to talk about having a town hall specifically about this for CLERB to vote on having a town hall about this topic. But at that time, if CLERB votes for that, Analytica Consulting personnel will be there. They've committed to being there to answer any questions, kind of do what the state auditors did, present that overview of their report, and allow for more dialogue, not just being stuck, in the regular, with limited time to speak and whatnot. So having said that, I'm not a statistician in any way, but I can just kind of tell you that what they did was they took countywide mortality rates and they kind of applied those for the 12 most populous counties to include San Diego in California. They applied those to the in-custody population. They talked about gender, race, ethnicity, age, and manners of death. Then with that, they took arrest and jail population data and then estimated the distribution in the county jail based upon that. They came up with that's how they came up with the expected number of in-custody deaths for each county. So, and again, it took a long time for me to wrap my head around how they were doing it, but it makes sense how they did it. And the expected number will provide a baseline for evaluating deaths, and each county was scaled to the same population as San Diego County's average daily population. So each county was scaled, all that other stuff was taken into consideration. If you have specific questions, if you folks have a town hall, ask them. But it's about 5,100 is the ADP, average daily population. So with that, they came up with 7 major findings. And those findings were, first, with the county population itself. So residents of San Diego County they were no more likely to die than residents in any other county in California. So that's the baseline. But after considering the countywide mortality rates, San Diego jails had the highest. San Diego jails have the highest number of unexplained deaths. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. What they contend, well, let's just leave it at that. They were the only county, San Diego, we were the only county that had a statistically significant increase over what would have been expected with the mortality data, 24 excess deaths. No other county had any kind of statistically significant excess death, and many of the counties had less than what would have been expected. So that's their outcome on that. Interestingly enough, in San Diego County, whites were more likely to die in custody in the county jails. However, Black folks were more likely to be in jail. It was an interesting finding on the part of Analytica, because if you look at the population for Black folks in San Diego County is anywhere from 5 to 6%, right? So if I recall correctly, they were in jail at a rate of like 15% and died at a rate of 18%, or vice versa. But it was like 3 times what the population is for them to be in jail. But their rates of death were not, that whites were more likely to die in jail. So hopefully that makes some sense. It was an interesting finding, at least I found it to be interesting. The risk of overdose, basically drug-related, and the risk of drug-related deaths, according to Analytica, is the greatest in San Diego County jails as opposed to the other 11 counties that were looked at. Again, deaths for folks, drug-related deaths in the county of San Diego obviously are very high anyway. But in San Diego County jails, with everything that they did, it's still the highest rate, the highest risk is San Diego County jails. As far as suicides in county jail, every county that in the study, I believe it was every county, just about, maybe one or two were not statistically significant. Every county had more deaths, more suicide deaths than what would be expected. Everyone, some of them upwards of 4 times what should be expected. And San Diego County was one of them. There were several counties that were at that rate. So obviously suicide, being in custody is a risk factor for suicide. And so many counties, it was evident that suicide is obviously a very high, it's a risk in many county jails, in every county jail that Analytica worked at. Now, one of the other findings was, one of the people, public commenters mentioned, the elevated risk of death appears to be isolated to the unsentenced jail population. Well, one of the things that we can't capture, well, and in San Diego County, it was pretty high. For unsentence, there were 51 excess deaths, 51. And that was San Diego was the only county that has statistically significant findings in that area with 51 excess deaths for unsentenced. And then sentenced, everybody was below what would be expected. Every other county was below what would be expected. One of the things we'd like to look at, to my knowledge, we don't believe, a lot of this data came from the state's death reporting, in custody death data reporting form that says, what part of the process kind of that someone's in when they die. And one of them is sentence, right? But there's really nowhere, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, but this was what I was saying to Analytica, there's nothing on there about conviction. Now, granted, because unsentenced could be convicted or not, right? I contend that everybody on this call right now could wind up in county jail tonight, and it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. So we wanted to look at the deaths of people who were not convicted, but there wasn't a way for that to happen. It was sentenced versus unsentenced. So one of the things that we'd like to propose for the state down the road is that if there's a way to capture that conviction statewide for deaths in custody, that would be helpful, we think, although it looks like obviously most of the people that die in county jails will probably not have been convicted, but that's just me. And then finally, public oversight of in-custody deaths lacks key information. And that's detailed quite a bit in the report. Just certain things are not on these forms, right? One of the things that we'd love to be able to present, it seems to make sense, is from how soon after booking does someone die? How soon? That's a huge deal, right? Is it 24 hours? Is it 48 hours? I know the argument has been made that, in San Diego County jails, we don't have other entities in the county that have these folks being booked in. But so the argument was that perhaps people are dying outside of county jails in other counties during that first 24 hours. I don't think that Analytica put it in their report, but I know one of the things they were looking at was that doesn't hold water, because they had all the data from all the deaths that occurred in custody, and there were only, I think maybe, I don't know, I don't want to misspeak, but there were some that died in city jails, specifically in Los Angeles County and other counties, but it was not a significant number of people. So, but again, I don't have the data in front of me. I just know that that's something that we had talked about. So there are many different things that there's potential for the state to make improvements on how in custody deaths are tracked, the data that's out there. So I think I'll just wrap it up right now. That is the reason we did it. That's the history. Those are the findings. And with that, I don't see, Chair Youngflesh, any public comment yet on this topic. I'll let you know if that happens. Now I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parker. Is there any board member comment or questions for Mr. Parker? Mr. Wilson?
I think Ms. Pintar was before me, so I'll yield to Ms. Pintar.
Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Parker, in that report, it was noted in finding 7 that there was a lack of information that would really help us to define some solutions to in-custody deaths. I believe that the additional areas of research or statistical analysis for in-custody death as reflected on page 15 would merit serious consideration and funding. How do you see that?
I couldn't agree more, Mr. Wilson, and that's one of the things I was going to wait for you folks to have comment and whatnot. But then finally, before kicking it back over for any kind of vote that you folks might want to take or whatever, there are 15 areas, suggested areas of research for future in-custody death studies that Analytica has put together. And as Mr. Wilson said, it's on pages 15 to 16. There are, out of those 15, I mean, there are at least 5 right off the top that are huge, that I think would be huge for the community. And, you know, obviously it's what inmates are most vulnerable. Because before I get into that, okay, now we know the situation, right? We know the data. All the data is indicating something, right? That there's a higher risk of death on certain types of death in the jail. Overall risk is higher as well. Okay, now we have that. Now what? Why, right? Why? What can be done and what are the root causes? And I think that that's where we're at right now. So some of the areas for future in-custody studies would be, you know, obviously one of inmates most vulnerable to that risk of death, right? When they're first admitted, after being sentenced, after being convicted, what, when? What are the in-custody rates among inmates with a history of mental illness? Like, it's going to be hard to track. It's going to be hard to track. What about the in-custody death rates for folks who were homeless coming in? And again, a lot of it goes back to medical care provided, right? When you talk about mental health issues and medical issues, you have to look at that as well. So obviously there's that talk about what's the relationship between mental health services and in-custody deaths. Does the race, gender, or age of any inmate play a role in the circumstances surrounding the deaths and subsequent investigations into those deaths? We don't know. We don't know how to even go about doing that, but these are areas suggested for further research. We talked about what's the impact of compassionate release on the nature and number of in-custody deaths. I kind of touched upon it a little earlier in the meeting. And obviously has that realignment in California in 2011 shaping custody deaths in county jails. There are 10 other areas. So to me, Mr. Wilson, this is a wonderful compilation of data that's accurate. And it would apply not just here. I encourage other counties in San Diego, in California to look at this, especially those counties that are mentioned. I hope that they could glean something from it as well. But I think now it's time to look into the whys, right? I think that's where we are. And then if there are these other areas of future research that CLERB would want us to try to pursue to obtain funding for and whatnot, then that's something that the CLERB would direct me to do. Does that answer the question, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I mean, I'm very interested in seeing how we can pursue finding funding to get this additional data, because one of the things that helps us do it helps us to understand what we don't know. You know, there's a lot about in custody deaths that we still don't know, as you know, such as, you know, when is a inmate most vulnerable to having a fatal episode?
Right, and I can tell you that the Sheriff's Department, in my conversations with Analytica, they were forthcoming with, my understanding is all the data they have. They didn't hold back. They gave all the information, all the data, and the data is there. The data is there to do some pretty in-depth analysis for the deaths that are occurring, the time, you know, what was the population in the jail at the time? Was there anything significantly going on at that time in the jail when someone died or was found unresponsive? There's a lot of information there that Analytica believes could be utilized to come up with some answers.
Yeah, I mean, knowing perhaps the time, the windows of time they're most vulnerable, the day of the week. I mean, we know for police officers which days are very dangerous for police officers, and we know which part of their shifts are most dangerous. So it'd be interesting to have that same kind of data on when a inmate is most vulnerable, so we could focus on taking corrective action or having intervention in place to mitigate deaths in custody. Thank you.
Ms. Pintar?
Thank you. Paul, to Mr. Wilson's first question about, I think it was finding number 7 regarding the lack of information, that they list a number of things that the data, they didn't have data that they did not have access to. But in all of the reports that we review regarding in custody deaths, I believe all of this information is included, is it not? Is it just a matter of how the departments are reporting it to the state?
Yeah, in our investigations to you, we do have that information, but it's a matter again of the state, the consistency with filing with the state, what information's on, on record with the state to make these analyses.
So do other counties collect the same information as we do? And when we're looking at these reports, I guess I'm not articulating my point very clearly, but it seems like this data exists. It's just not being reported.
I think you just nailed it. That's
Okay.
exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. And that was, I think, the recommendation, what's the verbiage on the lack of the reporting.
reporting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So the other thing is that several things in this jumped out at me as dovetailing with many of the other studies that we've seen, including the state audit. And I believe there was I don't remember which one it was. Maybe it was the state audit that showed that a number of these deaths are happening within a few days of intake, within a few days, within a week. And I wonder if there's a correlation between unsentenced and the short period of time that one of the other studies showed us that many of these deaths are occurring. At least that's what it seems like in my short time here in reviewing these cases, that a lot of these are happening within a very short period of time after someone has been detained.
I think to that point, Ms. Pitar, if I may, a lot of the thought is that as the state recommended a more rigorous mental health and medical screening upon intake, some of these folks who are dying upon intake within that certain time period might be drug related, might be the natural ones, might be more the suicide because of the risk of just being in custody. So, but again, I think the state is trying to address it by saying you need to screen better on the front end to reduce the number of those deaths in that 24, 48, 72-hour period.
And that's why I raised it, because I think that this data, to me, reinforces the state audit's suggestion that the department needs better mental health and healthcare professionals, not better professionals. We need additional professionals at the screening and intake at time of intake. And I believe that according to the state audit, they said that this is something that the County of Riverside was already doing. And I just raise it because it seems to me that this is just reinforces that finding from the state audit.
Are there any further questions or comments?
Chair
Okay.
Youngbless, you have 3 requests to speak from the public.
Okay.
Mr. Miller.
Yes, this is Yusef Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition. Thank you for the report and the analysis of the report. I think the report needs some more detail on the measuring tools, and as you've all been saying. And for example, it seems as if the only factor here is the inmate's condition. But what we're not looking at is maybe any neglect or violence from the deputies themselves, because we know Elisa Serna wasn't from without neglect. James Mills was not from without neglect. Omar Arroyo, not without neglect. Saxon Rodriguez, violence with Paul Silva, it was not his fault. Earl McNeil, neglect and violence. So these are critical touch points that we need in these reports, and to not make it sway towards the inmate's own condition, which calls for our high in custody death rate. We know from the families that we support and that join our teams, and people who've actually survived, not only the people who have died, but the people who actually survived talked about they didn't get their blood pressure medicine, they almost died. They didn't get their seizure medicine. One man was on his top bunk and didn't receive his seizure medicine, had a seizure and fell out on his head, and he's in a coma. So the neglect and violence that also happens, and not just from other inmates, but from our deputies, also needs to be looked at. That cannot be an untouchable area when it comes to reporting on in custody deaths and the issues surrounding the inmate's death or harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next, we will go to Ms. Francine Maxwell. Ms. Maxwell, are you there?
Oh, it didn't let me unmute. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Good evening, Francine Maxwell, Southeastern San Diego. I'd like to make sure that we can get some more bullet points, especially as it pertains to the in custody deaths compassionate release. Remember that it needs to be noted that family members would not be able to say goodbye. They wouldn't be able to spend the last 3 to 4 hours after someone has been deemed that they may not make it. And so the compassionate release still needs to continue to be noted as in custody deaths, because they are still in custody, but the compassionate release is from the family side, so people can gather, say goodbye, and things like that. So I need to make sure I haven't heard that in your discussion tonight. Also, remember, this is the first assignment, detention or court, for many deputy sheriffs. And so just like in the San Diego Police Department, we have a horrific group of people that are field training officers because they're teaching people their bad habits. So I'm concerned that there was no notation about some people that are treating these brand new deputy sheriffs inside on their bad habits. And so that definitely needs to be tracked as it pertains to our in custody deaths. And lastly, in custody deaths, the intake. The intake issue is huge and it hasn't been touched upon like it needs to be. We have people that have extremely detailed medical issues and they've said them during the intake and nothing was heard except for that they had diabetes. Then they were subsequently handed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And there is definitely should have been noted about the dietary issues, the dietary restrictions. And so intake is very huge and needs a complete deep dive. It's my understanding that we have somebody new over intake named Teresa. And so I'm going to do some research so that I can get introduced to her, because that's where we need to effectuate change within the next 30 days, 2 days, because intake is being lost. Because people are not being heard when they are doing a list of their issues, rather medical, dietary, and things like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Analytical, is that the analytical in Scripps Ranch or the one in Bethesda, Maryland? Both are excellent firms. Which one did you contract with?
It's a local firm.
Oh, they're excellent, very good in data management. I agree with Ms. Maxwell. We need to talk to the newer person and get more details on how we can help do a better job, help her do a better job as a community. We are sometimes forgetting that the population, although they're paid and every life is precious, we're not, you know, it's just a challenging environment. It is. It's a challenge, and I've worked in that environment before. But we need to better understand how we can help everyone, especially inmates. So I'm looking forward to more data, doing more to make sure that we reduce and hopefully alleviate that. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about it and seeing more of their work and doing what I can to help the situation become a lot better than it is by volunteering whatever resources or knowledge I have. But Analytica is an excellent firm, and I can applaud, agree with you more that they're very good. And that with that, I'll yield back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. At this, I see one more request to speak. Chair Youngflesh, it will be Dave Myers.
Thank you. So I just wanted to make sure that the board and the board members understand when you're requesting information or you hear the words compassionate release. And I want to remind you that Patrick Fern case, who was brain dead for a week and was compassionately released from custody after he was placed in the wrong cell and beaten to death by his roommate, is a whole lot different than a compassionate release from an elderly inmate who has chronic long-term health issues, cancer, something similar to that, who then is compassionately released. Those are two totally different scenarios. And just so the board, when you're looking at in custody deaths, and I think this is one of the cases Mr. Parker referred to, that he was notified about it because of the severe injuries and was later responding to it. Those are two totally different compassionate release type cases and would have long-term implications on your evaluations of recommendations to fix stuff in custody. So those are just as important to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Chair Youngflesh, I do not see any other requests to speak. I have not received any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parker. Do we have anything further from any of the board members on this item? If not, then I'll move on to the next agenda item. Okay, moving on to 7G, which is the discussion to finalize the CLERB Town Hall regarding the analytical consulting report. Mr. Parker, would you mind introducing this item as well?
Sure. To be consistent with CLERB's practices over the last couple of months, the topics that have been front and center at that time were discussed at a board meeting, but then also a town hall was scheduled to have further presentation from folks who were the authors of those reports, whether it was the CPE or the state auditor. And so to give CLERB the opportunity to do the same here, to have a more robust, in-depth discussion that's not, that can be more of a exchange of information as opposed to just comments and whatnot. That's why it's on the agenda, to see if you folks have the appetite to do so. And normally what you folks have been doing, if you do, it's normally 2 weeks after the meeting. So looking at like April 26th, if that's what you folks would vote to do.
Okay, and so this would be the time to discuss whether we wanted to go ahead and do that, and then also finalize any dates and times. Is that correct?
That is correct. And before you do that, keep in mind that Analytica has said that they would be there if a town hall was scheduled. And also, if after that, the board, you might want to put, it would be an opportunity for the board to, with an item on the agenda, to direct further action on my part, whether it's to look into the further research topics or whatever the board might come up with after the town hall. We'll figure it out, but that's just so everyone knows what we're talking about and what could be done.
Okay, so before we can discuss this item, is there a motion to have a town hall? So a motion is made by Mr. Wilson. Is there a second for a town hall? Seconded by Ms. Domingos, did you? Okay, seconded by Ms. Domingos. And then with that, I'd open the floor to any comments or discussion by any board members as to, and I guess prior to that, I should qualify, is this motion that you've made, Mr. Wilson, just to have the town hall and then Ms. Razzo, does the motion need to contain the specifics as to the time and the date, or can we just direct Mr. Parker to finalize the date and time?
I believe the last time we went over this, we had some debate over the date and time and trying to organize it. I think maybe for our purposes, it would be good to start the motion first with whether or not to have the town hall. And then second, I think we can propose dates and then direct Mr. Parker to follow up with that. But given that we have issues with quorum and making sure people are there, it'd be best, I would recommend finalizing dates and times today fully.
Okay, well, we have a first and second for a motion or just having the town hall already. So are you suggesting two separate motions?
Yes, to address the dates and times, or he can amend the motion if desired.
Okay, so we already have a first and second just for a motion for a town hall. The floor is open for discussion. Ms. Domingos, I do see that your hand is up. Would you like to make a comment or a question regarding the town hall?
Your comment. I remember Ms. Hoffman, the last two times we had the town hall, she actually said it will be treated as a special meeting and advised us not to. It wasn't a classical town hall in the sense of the word, it was a special meeting. And I agree with Ms. Razzo, who's on council, when she says that we should finalize it today.
Correct, it is a special meeting. However, I think as far as the date and the time, we still need to adhere to giving the proper notice for a special meeting. So if we're going to go ahead and have the town hall, Pastor Spriggs, I believe, is still with us. I think he just turned his camera off. There he is. Can you please call roll, Pastor Spriggs? If there's no further discussion regarding just whether we are going to have a town hall or not.
Chair Young Flex, well, Pastor Spriggs wouldn't be able to stay to the end. Take off, he's out of town, so I don't know if he's still here. You wanted me to pass that along to you?
Oh, okay. I thought I just saw him, but maybe not. Do we still have a quorum, Mr. Parker?
We do.
Okay. Okay. Well, Mr. Parker, would you mind calling roll? I hate
I'll
to.
call roll, no problem. Chair Youngflesh,
Yes.
Ms. Domingos,
Yes.
Ms. Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Ms. Pintar,
Yes.
Mr. Ware,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay. And then would anyone like to make a motion as to a date or time? I suppose it could be at least a date, and then we could direct with Mr. Parker to coordinate the time and direct him to come up with the agenda.
Yes, we could coordinate the times. The issues that we've had at times before is I believe we had a lack of a quorum at a prior special meeting. And so just the recommendation is to have as much finalized with people committing to being present so we don't run that risk.
Well, I mean, that is difficult since we only have 6 members here now.
That is correct.
Right. And with only having 6 members here now and then having people verbally commit, I mean, that alone runs a difficulty too. So perhaps what would be your suggestion, Ms. Razzo?
I think in the past we had multiple dates proposed Ultimately, the issue is if we're going to have a special meeting, we need to have a quorum. So certainly not everyone needs to be present, but we would need a quorum to have our meeting. I think in the past, we ran into a special meeting issue where not everyone was present. It's just a matter of being preemptive. So my recommendation is gathering everyone's schedule. I don't know, Mr. Parker, if there's any scheduling issues with Analytica, but I think we could propose. Do you have any dates proposed that would meet our notice requirements?
Sure. I don't know if there are any concerns with Analytica. They didn't indicate that there were there are dates and times that won't work for them. They know that our meetings are normally on Tuesdays, is my understanding. And what I'd like to do is I just want the board to consider, unless somebody had mentioned that maybe there were issues with communities on some Tuesdays. I could be wrong. I don't recall whether there was a conflict, but I think the easiest thing to do right now is just be consistent with what this board has done with the last 2 months worth of town halls. To have it 2 weeks after this meeting at 5:30. All of them should always start at 5:30. That's our consistent time. And my question to you, Ms. Razo, let's just say, for sake of argument, that we set this up and we do what we're going to do, but you don't have a quorum. You just can't vote. You can still move forward with the town hall, could you not? You just couldn't vote on anything.
From my understanding, I need to double check. So this would be subject, and I will look into this, but my understanding, without a quorum present, it may not be proper to hear, since it would be obtaining testimony, so to speak. It may not be proper, but I do want to look into that before I say that's finalized. You are correct in terms of voting, but typically with the lack of a quorum, the go-to thing to do at that point is to move to reschedule to a date when there is a quorum. But let me double check and look into your issue. If there is not a quorum at a town hall type event, if there's going to be a problem, even if there's no action taken.
Understood. I think that this board should just move forward with picking the date and time now, April 26th, throw it out there. And then if there are some issues with that afterwards, I'll make sure that I get with the board and with the board members, make sure everybody knows that that's what the board has decided to do tonight. And then if they're going to be concerns with a quorum, then we'll figure it out at that point. But right now, that's my advice, so we can move forward. Chair Youngflesh, Ms. Domingos has a question.
Ms. Domingos?
After you, Madam Chair.
Oh, no, I think he was just telling me you had a question.
Oh, okay. So so that I understand this town hall is being put together by the board, the CLERB board, not any subcommittee, or is this being put together by the in custody death subcommittee, the ad hoc committee? Because I'm not quite clear what I think I'm struggling with is who is spearheading this town hall.
The CLERB is spearheading the town hall. The CLERB spearheads everything that's scheduled by CLERB. It's a matter of who's going to moderate, right? Who would moderate the town hall? And normally that would fall back to the chair, unless it would be the in custody death data committee, that the chair would yield or yield her authority to one of the members on that. But right now, everything that CLERB does, as far as anything on the agenda, is spearheaded by the entirety, which is why we need that vote. Correct? Am I right, Ms. Razo?
You are correct. This would be a meeting held by CLERB, and anytime we would have a majority present, it would be already deemed a meeting under the Brown Act.
Okay, and Ms. Razo, generally it has to be another person making the motion, correct? So I need to call for the motion to be April 26th at 5:30, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so made by Mr. Wilson has said he will make the motion. Is there a second? I do not see a second is it second? Ms. Domingos, are you seconding? Okay, it's seconded by Ms. Domingos. Mr. Parker, would you mind calling the vote, please?
Chair Youngflesh?
Yes.
Ms. Domingos?
Yes.
Ms. Keen-Ayub?
Yes.
Ms. Pintar?
I will vote yes. I will not be here that day, however.
Mr. Ware?
Yes.
And Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Vote carries 6-0.
All right. And then I will move on to agenda item 7H, policy recommendation to SCSC use of technology to monitor health and safety of inmates. And I believe that's you, Mr. Parker, again.
It is. Thank you, Chair Youngflesh. In reference to obviously the number one concern with the deaths in custody, with the audit and reporting and our analysis, one of the things that I got to thinking was, obviously I think that we're here to make recommendations to the department to assist them in reducing the deaths whenever possible. I'm not certain if the department has, I'm sure the department has at some point looked into technology, right? I mean, there's a lot of technology, there is technology, there are emerging technologies out there to help identify those folks after they're in custody who may be having a medical issue. And so upon my research, I came up with two new technologies that are out there. One is a band placed on the person's wrist or ankle that monitors the heart rate. It's being used by smaller sheriff's offices in Arkansas and Oklahoma. There's another device that's used in Europe that's it's a high-tech camera inside of a cell that monitors an inmate's movement and pulse and breathing. Of course, I understand, and we all understand that these are going to be expensive propositions, right? But I think that this recommendation I'm putting forward to you folks to consider so that we can ask the department to at least research if they haven't done so already. And if they have done so already, research and report out to the public the steps that they've taken to address the use of technology to reduce these deaths. If you think about it, if there is a band or something like that, and again, I'm naive, I've not worked in a jail. I understand that it may be difficult or whatever, but the technology exists. And you have Apple Watches that can tell you what your heart is, what your heart rate is, what your breathing is. Why cannot something be utilized for inmates to then, instead of, in addition to the checks and everything else that's mandated to be done, if someone's having an issue, somehow, some way that would, the control tower depths would be notified or medical would be notified. So that's a thought. It could be pie in the sky, but I think we need to think outside the box and assist the sheriff's department in reducing the number of deaths. So those are my 2 cents. I'll turn it back over to you. Oh, so basically the recommendations are to research and publicly report the results of its research efforts, the associated costs, technology considered, reasons for not implementing if applicable, the use of technological devices to identify and subsequently aid inmates who may be in medical distress. And then number 2, incorporate into policy the use of technological devices to identify and subsequently aid inmates who may be in medical distress. I'll turn it back. There's one request for public comment, but I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Youngflesh.
Thank you. First, I'll ask for any board member comment or questions about policy recommendation that Mr. Parker spoke of. Okay, seeing no board member comment or question, then I would then move to any public comment. Mr. Parker.
We have a request to speak from Ilka. Ilka.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Parker and board. I do want to acknowledge the hard work that the board is doing. I also want to acknowledge the hard work that Lori Saldana, who's running in District 2, as well as Shane Harris of, the People's Association of Justice, in addition to Francine Maxwell, did by meeting with the interim sheriff, and of course our very own David Myers. I have to mention these names. We shouldn't just care about reducing deaths. We need to stop deaths. Deputies that are working for the sheriff's department should have more superior training and also sensitivity training, so they don't forget that these people in our jail systems are human beings. Last I checked, rehabilitation did not equate to being able to be killed, because that's just murder when we're not caring about people's health. I think Mr. Parker's suggestion about, what Apple Watches, but there's also Fitbit, and there's different variations that could go on every single inmate, and there is no problem with that being a cost, because let's face it, we have the highest death rate in our county in the entire state. We all know that already. So if that means us spending more time and more money and putting health of the individuals that are serving time for rehabilitation, or there's a lot of people in our jail systems that aren't even supposed to be there in the first place and are immediately released and or die in custody. So there has to be an investment on our part to make up for the, not make up for the loss of life, but show that we respect what had happened under our watch. That is not okay. It is not okay what our current sheriff and undersheriff allowed to happen under their watch. And that is why we have to be adamant and not care about the cost for the safety of the people that are human beings that deserve humane treatment, and they do not need to be treated like insects, because I find it, important that we're actually thinking, let's reduce deaths. We need to stop deaths. There's no reason why we should have these kind of deaths in our jail systems. So, Mr. Parker, thank you so much for suggesting the Fitbit Apple Watch kind of idea, because I think every inmate should have one of those on their wrists. That way we know their safety. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you. And also, before I bring it back to Chair Youngflesh, as noted in our policy recommendation, that we clearly write that the financial cost of implementing or at minimum initiating a pilot project involving new technology will be costly. However, CLERB believes the value of human life obviously outweighs any cost. So that's on our recommendation as well, to the speaker's point. Back to you, Chair Youngflesh.
Thank you. And we would need a motion to direct Mr. Parker to put forth this policy recommendation. Do I hear a motion from any of the board members? So made by Ms. Domingos. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Ware. Mr. Parker, would you mind calling roll, please?
Sure. Can you remind me who made the motion?
Ms. Domingos.
I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Mingus. My apologies. Chair Youngflesh.
Yes.
Mr. Mingus.
Yes.
Ms. Kenayuk.
Yes.
Ms. Pintar.
Yes.
Mr. Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And moving on to agenda item 7J, policy recommendation to expand the SD family liaison protocol. Again, Mr. Parker, would you please give an introduction to this item?
Well, unfortunately, Chair Youngflesh, I think you skipped 7I for the probation department. Same recommendation, but for probation department.
I apologize. I will go back to 7I then.
So with that, Chair Youngflesh, this is the exact same recommendation, but for the probation department. The probation department obviously operates 2 juvenile detention facilities, and over the past 10 years, there have been, to my knowledge, on record with CLERB, 2 deaths have occurred in facilities operated by the probation department. So I don't want to not include them in this potentially life-saving recommendation. So same recommendation, same reasons. Back to you, Chair Youngflesh. I have no request to speak noted.
Okay, and with that then, same request. Is there a motion to direct Mr. Parker to set forth this policy recommendation? We would require a motion to, okay, thank you. The motion is made by Ms. Pintar and seconded by Ms. Domingos. And Mr. Parker, could you please call roll?
Chair Youngflesh.
Yes.
Ms. Domingos.
Yes.
Ms. Kenayuk.
Yes.
Ms. Pintar.
Yes.
Mr. Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you so much. Now I'm finally moving on to 7J, policy recommendation to expand the SD-SC family liaison protocol. Mr. Parker, thank you so much for filling in for Mr. Pastor Spriggs too.
Oh, no, not a problem, not a problem. All right, so this policy recommendation has come about over the course of conducting our death investigations, it became obvious to me when talking to some of the family members that they had not been talked to or had an opportunity to have their questions answered at the end of an investigation. Now, for background, it's a great program that the Sheriff's Department implemented in August 2019. It's much needed, and it's called the Family Liaison Program. And real quickly, I'm just going to give the overview so everyone on the call knows what the program is, the purpose of the program, and the proactive nature of the program at this point. The goal of the family liaison is to effectively communicate with the family of the involved subject who has been involved in a shooting, use of force with deputies where significant injury or death occurs, or an in-custody death. The families of these individuals are often left with unanswered questions during an exceptionally difficult and emotionally charged time. The family liaison will work closely with family members and be a departmental point of contact. The family liaison will answer questions and follow up on requests for assistance while conforming to confidentiality laws and respecting privacy rights, in addition to maintaining the integrity of the investigation. The affected station and facility commander or designee shall become the departmental liaison to the deceased or injured person's family. Now, upon my review of this, I can find no specific mandate that the family liaison meet with families at the conclusion of the investigation, specifically into a death. Now, I also understand, and I think we all understand, that legal action is pursued in many situations, right? And I think it's fair to say that if anyone dies in custody or at the hands of a deputy, there's probably going to be a lawsuit. And I can understand the rationale on the part of county departments to, not discuss pending litigation, issues under pending litigation. I get that. However, it's also true that families deserve answers and should not have to pursue legal action from the county just to get them. So as the policy statement says on the part of the Sheriff's Department, these family members are often left with unanswered questions during an exceptionally difficult and emotionally charged time. That's true. As a former medical examiner investigator with thousands of deaths that I've experienced over my 20-some years in that field, I know firsthand. I've not been subjected to that kind of loss, but I know firsthand in talking to families that many times all they want are answers. That's it. Just tell me what happened. And sometimes that even makes liability go away, even makes lawsuits go away if you can just communicate, right? So what I'd like to point out about the policy statement, the procedures acknowledge, the Sheriff's Department procedures acknowledge that family members should not only be treated with dignity, compassion, and assistance, but also as a deputy would like to be treated under similar circumstances. And I would venture to say that anybody on this call, if their loved one died in custody, would want answers at the conclusion of the investigation. So with that, I'm putting forth this policy recommendation for your consideration that we believe that family members deserve those answers and contend that establishing, maintaining, and nurturing open lines of communication will not only result in the provision of well-deserved compassionate service to grieving community members, but may begin to bridge the gap in law enforcement community relations and actually reduce liability in the process. Those are my thoughts. That's the background. So it's recommended that the Sheriff's Department update its section to mandate that the family liaison or designee meet with the family at the conclusion of the investigation into a shooting, use of force resulting in significant injury, death, or an in-custody death. The purpose of the meeting will be to advise the family of the investigative outcome, answer questions, and provide information when appropriate. Obviously, as currently stated in the policy, when information cannot be released, the family will be provided with an explanation, follow-up, or referrals to appropriate agencies. With that, at this point, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Youngflesh.
Thank you. Mr. Ware, were you making a motion to approve the policy, put forth policy recommendation? Great. Thank you for being proactive. And it's seconded by Ms. Keen-Ayub. And is there any discussion by any of the board members? Hearing none. Mr. Parker, will you please call roll?
I do see a question from Ms. Domingos, and I don't have any requests to speak.
Oh, I apologize. Ms. Domingos.
Yeah, I just had a clarification question. Your policy recommendation was after the closure of the case, or I wasn't quite sure.
At the conclusion of the law enforcement investigation, or at the Sheriff's Department investigation into the death.
Okay,
I mean,
so
they're supposed to, answer the questions throughout the process when they can.
okay.
When they can. I mean, that's already in their policy. And
Okay.
I think one of the things that I noticed, and again, this is only from talking to several families, that there is contact along the way. But the contact, what families are reporting is that the contact seems more to get information as opposed to give information. So that's already, there is some conversation along the way. I don't know how robust it is, but at the end of the investigation, I'm contending that the families need to be provided answers.
Thank you, makes sense.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? No? Mr. Parker, would you please call roll again? Thank you.
Sure. Chair Youngflesh,
Yes.
Mr. Mingos,
Yes.
Ms. Keenan,
Yes.
Ms. Pintar,
Yes.
Mr. Ware,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. 7K, vote to continue or terminate investigation of CLERB case number 20050. And again, Mr. Parker, I do believe this is you.
Mr. Mingos, do you have a question first, or I see your hand?
No, I forgot to lower my hand.
All right, thank you. All right. So CLERB's rules and regulations, everything about CLERB says that we have jurisdiction over those folks who are currently employed as peace officers. So sometimes during the course of investigation, peace officers retire, resign for whatever reason. So at that point, we don't have jurisdiction over them to do anything unless under CLERB rules and regulations section 5.8, unless CLERB tells staff to continue on in an investigation when the subject officer is no longer with the department. On March 25th of this year, we received the materials for the for the deputy involved shooting of Mr. Bills that occurred sometime back downtown courthouse. We received those materials again March 25th. So at that point, our timeline starts March 25th. What I need to do is to ask CLERB to determine whether or not you want me to investigate that or not, because the involved deputy is no longer an employee of the department. Having said that, this is a death at the hands of a law enforcement officer. Obviously, this deputy was terminated, charged, convicted, and imprisoned. However, there may be policy recommendations that may come up. This was one of the issues that happened when we dismissed those 22 cases many, many years ago. So I'm putting forth to the board for you folks to tell me whether or not to move forward to do our investigation into this deputy involved shooting. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair Youngflesh.
Thank you. Is there a motion to have Mr. Parker continue to, the way that's written is vote to continue or terminate investigation. So is there a motion either way? Is there a motion to continue, or is there a motion to terminate? And if neither is made, then it would just die. I'm sorry, Mr.
I'm just a little, can we do it separately? Because it sounds like are we voting either way, or?
Well, the way I understood it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Razzo, is that we need to have the motion made before we can discuss it.
That is correct.
And so I have to have a motion on the floor before we can actually discuss what we're doing. And so that's why I worded it that way. So yes, we could definitely, we would need to separate it. I think if there's no discussion, then essentially it would terminate because nothing would happen. So essentially it would be a vote to continue the investigation.
Thank you for clarifying.
So with that, Ms. Pintar, are you making a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion to terminate the investigation. It sounds like this was investigated and the officer was held accountable. If I understood Mr. Parker correctly.
You did.
Okay. And Ms. Raza, would we need a motion to terminate, or was I correct that if we did not have a motion to terminate, it would essentially terminate because there would be no action taken on it?
I
checking that again right now, but my understanding was, and Mr. Parker, please.
Yeah, Ms. Razzo and Chair Youngflesh, my understanding, based on the rules and regulations, there has to be, you have to tell me to do one or the other,
Okay,
is my understanding. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but that's why it's worded the way it's worded on there. It's up to you folks to tell me. I can't really do much independent. CLERB shall have the discretion to continue or terminate an investigation when the subject officer terminates employment. So CLERB needs to tell me one way or the other. What am I doing?
Yes,
Thank you.
I thought that perhaps, Madam Chair, you're referring to timing out or something along those lines, but in which case would occur if we did nothing over time. But at this moment, as what Paul Parker is requesting, we need a specific action.
okay, thank you for the clarification. And so as to Ms. Pintar's motion, is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Wilson, then I would open the floor to discussion. Is there any discussion from the board members? Mr. Ware?
Mr. Parker, in a situation like this, is if that officer took a leave of absence and this happened to occur, then is that considered him being separate from the agency or no?
No, if he was unavailable for any length of time, that would toll the investigation, toll the timing under POBAR, but it would not, no, we'd still have jurisdiction as long as someone's an employee. And yeah, I'll just, like I said, yes, that's the answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Domingos?
This was more of a question for Mr. Parker. So there were disciplinary actions brought against this officer. Is that correct or?
He's in prison. Yes, he was terminated, charged, convicted, and is currently doing time.
And do we know how long the sentence is or?
I think that there was some debate. I think there was some concern in the community that the sentence wasn't very long. I don't know off the top of my head how long that is, but it wasn't a lengthy sentence.
And so one last question. So does that mean once upon release, is he able to reapply and be reinstated or no more?
No, I would think not. I would think he wouldn't be able to be hired by any police department in the state of California.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no further comments or questions, then I would ask Mr. Parker to.
There's a public comment. There's a public comment. Sorry, it just popped up. Ms. Maxwell. Ms. Maxwell. Ms. Maxwell, are you there? All right, there's another public comment. We will go to that public comment, Dr. Fishman. Dr. Fishman. Dr. Fishman. Can anybody else hear me, or am I just? Okay, good. All right, thanks. All right, so let's try Ms. Maxwell again. Ms. Maxwell. Ms. Maxwell. All right, and then Dr. Fishman. All right, I'm gonna try to bring them both back. Let's see what we can do. Dr. Fishman, are you there? All right, for whatever reason, folks were having issues with Dr. Fishman. Let me try Ms. Maxwell again. Ms. Maxwell, are you there?
Mr. Parker, if these individuals can't speak, perhaps they can send a written comment to you. I know that's not ideal.
Okay, yeah, you mean send it to my email?
Is there a way for them to communicate?
We turn
And
the
we
commenting
turn off
commenting zone.
comments. can the, I'll just notify the individuals they are welcome to call in as opposed to using perhaps the internet if there's any issue.
So if anyone wants to comment on this, or I think this is the last item under new business, if anyone wants to comment, they can call in, and let me just go to the website, our website real fast to get that call information. That would be 669-900-6833, passcode 853-791. That would be the call-in information, and we'll try it again here real quickly. And while we're doing that, just so everyone, I mean, Chair Youngflesh, I hope I'm appropriate. One of the concerns that the public had and again, was still to look at it from a policy recommendation perspective. So just, you know, and I know the motion's been made and everything, but for conversation if need be. Ms. Maxwell. All right, and Dr. Fishman.
I have my hand up.
I do see you, Ms. Domingos. I was trying to wait till Mr. Parker tried to reach out to public comment again.
Dr. Fishman, are you there? Okay, I made those attempts. Chair Youngflesh, it's back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Ms. Domingos?
I actually, Mr. Parker said was what I was about to say or address or ask. The findings, were they CLERB findings, or were these findings made by other entities?
The
Did we do
findings,
our own independent, is it within our jurisdiction even to do?
no, not well. That's what we're talking about. Technically, it's up to you to tell me if it's in our jurisdiction right now, because the deputy is no longer a subject officer under our jurisdiction. However, the rules and regulations allow for CLERB. CLERB has the discretion to tell me whether to continue or terminate the investigation into this shooting death. But it's up to you folks. But no, that's why I'm asking. We don't have jurisdiction right now. It's up to you.
So my question is then, has the CLERB, because I just assumed like every other case that comes before us that we vote upon, that the investigators conducted their own, investigation. Was that the case with this case?
I can't touch it until you folks tell me to do so.
Okay, so how will that work with council? Because now I'm conflicted. How will that work legally? Because what I'm understanding from what you're saying, Mr. Parker, is it might not be something that we have. I just assumed, and that's my bad, that we had, it was one of the regular cases that we reviewed.
It is. If the subject officer is still employed, it absolutely is. Every other deputy involved shooting that we've had, the deputies have still been employed. So we have the jurisdiction over them. But once they separate, and now that we have the materials now, after the criminal investigation, now we can start our investigation. But the question is, this deputy is no longer under our jurisdiction unless you folks tell me with your discretion to move forward and do an investigation anyway.
Personally, I think we should, but then I don't know how that's going to work with the board and legal and what we can, and like, I would say we should continue, not close it out.
Just to clarify, Ms. Domingos, did you still have a question that you needed me to answer?
Yes, I'm not sure how to move forward with, is it out of pocket to make a motion? Is it something that I can do?
Well, there's a
motion on the floor.
I'm sorry?
There is a motion on the floor at the moment. I believe it was actually, Madam Chair, can you remind me what exactly was the motion?
There's a motion to terminate that's pending right now. And so we had the floor open to discussion, and then we need to call for the vote for that motion. And if that motion carries, then the item would terminate. If it doesn't carry, then another motion can be made.
Thank you for clarifying where we were on the motions. And yes, Ms. Domingos, if you would have your opportunity to vote on the motion that's currently on the floor. And as Chair Youngflesh said, if it doesn't carry, then to raise it again. But there's nothing further legally at the moment.
Okay, and then Ms. Ms. Domingos, did you have anything further before I call in another board member?
So there was no way to amend the current motion on the floor. We have to vote on the motion as is.
It would be up to the person who made the motion to amend the motion if they so choose. But it would have to be an amendment of the motion to terminate. Is that correct, Ms. Razzo?
Yes, and Ms. Domingos, if you did not want the motion, if you did not want it to be terminated, the vote would be no when roll was called.
Correct. Okay, Ms. Kinayu.
So I believe former Officer Russell was given a year and some probation, Ms. Domingos. And that is what he is serving. I guess my question would be, is completing our independent evaluation of the occurrence, would it bring closure to the family? Would it be something that we could help the family with dealing with losing this family member? And if so, then my suggestion would be to continue it. If not, if it stands within the criminal guidelines and what was seen during the trial, then perhaps we should release it and let it go.
Mr. Ware.
I just had a question. I was just thinking for Mr. Parker. In a case like this with law enforcement involved, former law enforcement officer involved, when does separation take place? Does separation take place upon his arrest or his conviction?
Whenever he was terminated by the department, my understanding is he was terminated by the department before, maybe it was right around the time of arrest or shortly thereafter. It wasn't a long time, I don't think. But my understanding is he was terminated before he was convicted.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other board members?
I actually believe he resigned or he separated from the department within a week of the incident. Sorry, Chair, your question.
Okay, Mr. Ware, do you have anything further?
I agree with Ms. Kinayu as far as the sensitivity towards the family.
Is there any other discussion? All right, then I would call for the question. Mr. Parker, would you mind calling the roll?
Chair Youngflesh.
Yes.
Ms. Domingos.
This is a vote to terminate the case, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I vote no.
Ms. Kinayu.
I abstain.
I'm sorry, abstain.
Abstain.
Ms. Pintar.
Yes.
Mr. Ware.
No.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
The motion does not pass. Chair Youngflesh, you have 3 yeses, 2 nos, and 1 abstention. You need 5.
Okay. And so in this case, Ms. Razzo, correct me if I'm wrong, we can have another motion. May I, Ms. Razzo, if nothing carries in this case, then what happens?
Procedurally, it's a strange situation because Mr. Parker does need direction. One thing that we could do, there could be a motion in the alternative. If we're at a standstill, we could continue this matter to a date where there are more members present, and that may result in a motion that will carry one way or the other.
Mr. Ware?
All right.
Oh, okay. Ms. Domingos.
So hearing that, Madam Chair, does that mean we can make a new motion to?
You can.
Can I make that motion, please? To continue?
Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Make a motion that we continue the case.
Okay. Motion to continue a case to the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Yes, in the event that we have more board members to see if we can have, I don't know how to word it, but the motion is just to keep the case open.
I think it's
Till
sufficient
the
to pay them.
CLERB has conducted its own independent investigation.
Okay, to clarify, then it doesn't sound like, Ms. Domingos, you're not moving to revisit a vote next meeting. You want to vote the opposite, I mean, you want a motion essentially to continue the investigation. So not to terminate, to continue.
Thank
the
you.
investigation.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. And is there a second? Okay, seconded by Mr. Ware. Is there any further discussion on this? Okay, Mr. Parker?
Chair Young Flush,
No.
Ms. Domingos,
Yes.
Ms. Keen Ayub,
I abstain.
Ms. Pintar,
No.
Mr. Wilson.
No.
Motion does not pass.
Okay.
That's Mr. Ware.
Oh, wait a minute, Mr. Ware. Where'd you go? Mr. Ware, sorry.
Yes.
Motion still does not pass.
So we're essentially in the same position we're in last time, where we would need a motion to continue this, as Ms. Razzo suggested, to the next board meeting. So I see two hands up, unless Mr. Ware just forgot to lower his hand. So is Ms. Keen Ayub making that motion?
I actually have a question.
Oh, okay, please.
I'd like to see if there's a possibility, or if it's in the realm of CLERB, to reach out to the family and see how they would feel about us continuing this investigation.
Ms. Razzo, are we allowed to do that?
I would ask Mr. Parker, is that something we've ever done in the past in terms of reaching out?
For this type of situation, we haven't reached out to say, hey, we don't know if we have, we may not have jurisdiction. What do you think? But on every case in which there's a death at the hands of the deputy, we're supposed to be, and we have instituted reaching out to families to let them know that we're involved in the investigation. So in this situation, we would do that. I would do that, and tell them that this death of their loved one falls under our jurisdiction on the surface. However, I'll explain all the intricacies and go from there. I can do whatever what you'd like. I mean, that's what I would do anyway, one way or the other. Even if you folks said no, I would reach out to the family and let them know that that's what's going to happen. And because it's going to be on a future agenda, one way or the other, to let them know.
Then given that history, and I don't see a reason why we could not, it was just a matter of what's been our practice in the past to ensure there's no issues with confidentiality, but it already would fall under our jurisdiction. So this should be fine.
Okay.
There would need to be direction though for Mr. Parker to do so. That's what's being requested.
Direction by way of a motion.
It's just to be safe, since there's been.
Yes, I saw Ms. Keen Ayub already. So Ms. Keen Ayub made the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Pintar. Mr. Parker, can you please call roll?
And this motion, just so I'm clear, is for me to contact the family?
Correct.
Okay.
Is this also, just to clarify, is this also to continue the matter, or is this just to contact the family?
Yeah, apparently it's both. Yes, it's a twofer, so yes.
So contact the family and continue this item one way or the other to the May agenda.
Yes, correct.
All right, so that's the motion. With that, Chair Young Flesh.
Yes.
Mr. Mingos.
For clarification to continue the matter and to notify the family.
To continue this item to the next agenda. And then I'll contact the family in the interim. And when I present this next month, I'll have hopefully family input one way or the other.
Yes.
Ms. Keen Ayub.
Yes.
Ms. Pintar.
Yes.
Mr. Ware,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, we're finally to agenda item 8, unfinished business. A, update. Authority for the executive officer to work with county staff to pursue legislation. I assume, Mr. Parker, it is again you.
It is, and really there's no change from what we reported last month. There is an assembly bill out that is, the whole point is to overturn the Copeland Press decision. At this point, our Office of Strategic and Intergovernmental Affairs, I have supported that, obviously, because that will result in transparency if it's passed. And so right now, the Office of Strategic and Intergovernmental Affairs is going to make sure that the Board of Supervisors gets a letter to support that. So that's where we are at that. That's a huge assembly bill, if passed, would really increase our transparency. The same things that this board has asked us to look at that we've been pushing for. That's number one. I mean, that's it. So that's the update on that.
Okay, well, number 2 is 8B, which is again you.
And with that, Chair Youngflesh, this is the most an incredibly important topic that would address a lot of the public comment earlier, a lot of the issues that's thought to be a lot of the medical and mental health screening. If we would have jurisdiction over that, we would get the whole picture. And County Council and I are working on that with labor relations. This is an active topic and it's being pushed forward. That's the most I have for you right now.
Thank you. And 8C, which was the update San Diegans for Justice CLERB report subcommittee. I believe that was from Eileen, but unfortunately she had to leave.
I can take it.
Thank you so much.
So basically, last month, you folks voted to create a subcommittee for the San Diegans for Justice report, in which the San Diegans for Justice identified 70 areas for improvement or opportunities for improvement. The subcommittee was unable to get together this month due to vacations and work schedules and whatnot, but has tasked me with taking those 70 recommendations, putting them together, analyzing them myself to see what we can do, what we have the ability to do right now internally, and then what would need to move to have the CLERB board do, and then what the board of supervisor would have to weigh in on, and then bring that back to them. I will be doing that this month, and so hopefully we'll have an update at the next meeting.
Wonderful, thank you. Moving on to board member comments. Do any board members have any comments at this time? Any train?
Chair Youngflesh, right when I was beginning to stop talking, Ms. Maxwell has a comment on 8C.
Okay, I'll go back to that. And then for public comment from Ms. Maxwell, please.
Ms. Maxwell.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Good evening, Francine Maxwell, Southeastern San Diego. I just had a question in reference to San Diego's for Justice. So they paid for a report and they get to charge the CLERB, and the CLERB has the staff for the county do all these extra hours. Do this taxpayer, do we get reimbursed from San Diego's for Justice? Because, people are donating to them and they're paying for studies and they're paying for reports. Do we get staff hours as taxpayers reimbursed? So if, Madam Chair, if you could put that in your chair report next week so that the community can understand, how does an outside entity come and add more work to the CLERB and charge our staff? And that's taxpayer dollars. So I'm just a little bit concerned. So Madam Chair, if you could come back next month and let the community understand that. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other public comment, Mr. Parker?
No.
Okay. Moving on to board member comments then. Are there any board member comments at this time? Okay. Are there any questions for the sheriff or probation liaisons? Okay, seeing none, then I would ask County Council to read us into closed session.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, the board will now adjourn to closed session to consider item 11 on tonight's agenda.
And then I would suggest coming back in 10 minutes so we can have a brief break since it's been a while.